savages. Know you couldn't handle this. Everyone who battled me, they falling like an avalanche. Got them falling back to back. Take them all just hand in hand. Y'all going home, so better pack your bags. I'm a heavy hitter, come take a sip of this potion. It float like a butterfly, I'm floating like the ocean. Battle cries of music to my ears, I'm the composer. Y'all can never hurt me, got you wilting like your roses.
Hello and welcome to the Weekly Stuff Podcast with Jonathan Lack.
And Sean Chapman.
We are here to talk about stuff this week on the show. We were off last week while we were finishing up Japanimation Station Season 3, which premieres July 4th with the classic adventures of Lupin III. It's going to be great. But we are back this week to talk mainly about video games, continue our discussion of stuff like Street Fighter VI that we have been playing incessantly, and then to go into all of the Not-E3 2023 news, because there's been a lot of video game stuff that would have been at E3, but there is no E3 anymore, so now it's just a series of sort of random showcases, and Sean has some notes on here, and we're not going to go through it as exhaustively as we have in years past, because we don't need to, but we will go over some reactions to the big stuff. Does that sound about right, Sean?
Yeah, I think with the death of E3 kind of comes the death of our E3 podcast, because I don't personally feel super motivated to watch all these showcases in real time, because I don't think the pre-recorded video showcases that are mostly just reels of video game trailers are as interesting as here's these big companies having to put on a weird live stage show, and here's a year where EA isn't releasing anything, but they still have to put on an hour-long stage show, and what the fuck do they do? That was kind of my favorite part. That part's gone, so it's mostly just a bunch of video game trailers. So most of the showcases I did not watch at all in real time, but I did go after the fact, pull out all the trailers and news that I thought was interesting that we might want to talk about, and put together a more condensed version of that than the exhaustive thing we used to do for E3.
Yeah, I think that sounds about right. Can you believe, Sean, they put the fucking Xbox showcase in theaters and you could go watch it live in a movie theater? How sad a person would you have to be to do that?
Yeah, especially when also, from what I understand, the Starfield thing was not even part of that. The Starfield thing was a separate, is a big 30-minute long gameplay breakdown of Starfield, which was a different show after that, which I don't think was part of what they showed in theaters. And that's the funniest part. That's here's a show that's mostly just a bunch of video game trailers. Maybe some of them you liked, maybe some of them you didn't. But the thing that was the big gameplay thing they had to do was not even part of technically their Xbox showcase. So I cannot imagine paying money to go sit in a movie theater to watch 2 hours of video game trailers. That sounds like a fucking nightmare. When I saw that show was going to be over 2 hours long, which they said ahead of time, that was one of the moments I was like, you know what? I don't need to watch that. I'm good. We were recording a podcast when it was airing anyways, and you had texted me ahead of time. I was like, no, let's just do the podcast. I'm
Yes.
good. I don't need to sit there and watch all that in real time. And it turns out, that was a 2 hour long show, and I watched maybe 15 minutes of trailers afterwards, and that was a better use of my time.
I think so. I just texted you because I knew historically you have felt stronger about doing these things than I have. And so I was like, hey, Sean, if you wanted to, we could delay the podcast and do this. And basically, as soon as I'd gotten the words out and sent, it was back and no, we're not doing that. And I'm like, Sean has broken the fever. I'm so glad for him. He's free. It's like the end of Aladdin, and you're the genie and the shackles have come off. You're free now.
I'm free. It's, my love of E3 is in the grave with E3 itself. It's just the time changes, and so must we.
All right, well, let's talk a quick little bit of housekeeping. Just a reminder, I said it at the top, but Japanimation Station Season 3, the classic adventures of Lupin III, an 8-episode season where we will be talking all about exactly what the title is, the classic adventures of Lupin III, basically anime through the 20th century with our boy Arsène Lupin III. And it is really good. We have completely finished it. We've recorded it all. I've edited it all. It's all up on the platforms and ready to go. If I fucking die, that season is still coming out because it's automated. It's great. So I am so excited for everybody to hear that. And if you are not yet subscribed to Japanimation Station, please go ahead and give that a subscribe on YouTube or your podcast platform of choice, because it's going to be a real good season.
Yes, yeah. We were recording the last episode of that when the Xbox showcase happened, and I think it was a better use of our time.
Absolutely. And just so everybody knows, before we get questions about it, next week on both this podcast and a special episode of Japanimation Station, we will have our review of Season 3 of Demon Slayer Kimetsu no Yaiba, the Swordsmith Village arc, which is like the final episode, like literally, I think, is going up as we're recording this on Crunchyroll. And I know that because I loaded Crunchyroll to check, and it had crashed, and I could not get anything to load. So I'm like, Demon Slayer must be out. That's the effect. And so we will be talking about that season next week. We've talked about all of that show before, so that should be fun, and just look forward to that as next week's episode.
Yeah, and as you say, that'll be going up on both of the feeds because that's how we have done it for Kimetsu.
Yes.
So wherever you go, you will get that Season 3 talk.
Yep, and same with when this season of Gundam The Witch from Mercury, we're actually not sure when that's ending because I don't think we have an episode count yet. But when we know,
I think it's probably will be 2 weeks from now as will be the last episode of that. I'm pretty sure it'll be 24 episodes if you combine the two seasons together.
Yeah, so there will be a review 1 or 2 weeks after that as well. So just be on the lookout for all of that in the future. But I think people were already starting to ask me about that. So there you go. And now in terms of stuff, Sean, I know we've both been up to Street Fighter, so let's hold off on that for a second, and we'll do a little Street Fighter segment. But what else have you been up to besides Street Fighter?
I did. So as we're recording this, it is on Father's Day. And one thing my dad likes to do is play video games. And he has been out of a video game to play for a while. And I realized a couple of days ago, I was looking at stuff. I was like, oh, wait, Diablo 4 is out. And my dad likes Diablo 3. This is a good excuse for me to also play Diablo 4. Because I can just buy the PS5 version. It comes with the PS4 version. I can download it on his PS4. And so I have played a very small amount of Diablo 4 because I only started playing it yesterday. I can talk about it a little bit. It is quite good. I'm playing as the Necromancer class, which was my preferred class all the way back in the Diablo 2 days, and I'm having a really good time with how they've set up the Necromancer. If you liked the Necromancer from Diablo 2, I know they added it as DLC for 3, but I never played that DLC, so I don't know what it was like in 3, but it definitely has a lot of the same stuff you can do from 2, but just kind of upgraded for this new game, and I'm having a good time with that. And yeah, it's in terms of like what the game is, it's very much Diablo with mixed with like some Destiny and kind of open world stuff. And that side of it, I've not so fully kind of settled on how I feel. But it controls like Diablo. It's very similar to the console version of Diablo 3. I'm playing obviously the console version. I assume if you play DLC or the PC version, you're doing lots of your clicking, right-clicking on enemies and stuff to attack. You've got a whole host of abilities you start unlocking from the skill tree. And it's very much like Diablo 3 in that you're really thinking about how about 5 or 6 of those major abilities are going to be sort of synergizing together as you go through your build and get new gear and pick talents and stuff. And it's about kind of finding for each of those classes, there's 5 classes in the game, sort of honing down on what your build is and really refining that and making that as good as possible while you go around and explore the world and go through dungeons and kill demons and monsters and get just a shitload of gear all over the place. So if you've played a Diablo, fundamentally, and especially if you played Diablo 3, fundamentally this is a extension of that in terms of the core gameplay design. I think the graphics are awesome. I love the look of the game, both in a technical sense, I think it looks very nice, but also the art style is fucking great. If you were like me and you kind of were a little bit iffy on the more comic booky thing they went for 3, and you preferred the more kind of grim gothic kind of thing, the very like horror gothic affected sort of style that Diablo 1 and 2 had. This is very much going back to that. It's got a lot more really fucked up hell stuff in it where like demons are just weird and fucked up. And you know, there's like, I did a side quest yesterday where a guy was filleted alive on chains or whatever. And it was like, I think it was inspired by Hellraiser because it was kind of like, if you've seen the Hellraiser movies, it was like that. And it's got a lot more of that kind of stuff in it, a little bit less of the kind of poppy comic booky stuff that Diablo 3 did, which was fine, but I kind of like the more fucked up tone this game is going for. That's like Diablo 2. And then in terms of like the open world stuff, this is a part I've not played enough of the game to kind of know how I feel about it, but it is an always online game. It has a very Destiny-like thing of where when you're in the hub world or you're in the open world, you will run into other players that are just kind of there doing their shit. When you go into dungeons or anything like that, there it will just be you, or if you're playing with other people, obviously it'll be you with your party, but they don't drop random people into any of the sort of really designed content. It's just the big kind of hub world stuff that they're in. And then the world, as far as I can tell, is just one big interconnected world. Maybe that will seem different when I get further in, but when you go into the map screen, you can just like zoom that map way out, and it looks like there's just a giant map and all the different areas are connected, rather than the classic Diablo, well, the Diablo 2, Diablo 3 thing, of where you have different kind of zones. Each zone in those games was like a big area that had a bunch of spokes that had their like sort of major dungeons, and each area had like 4 or 5 major dungeons. You completed an area, then you went to the next zone, which was designed the same way. This, as far as I can tell, is much more, this is a big old world. You can go run around. They give you very quickly a set of like 3 or 4 different main story objectives that you can go approach in any order, and kind of just have you run around and explore the world. And I think there are some things that are cool about that. Like, it has a lot more kind of off the beaten path stuff. It's got a lot more side content, like side quests and optional dungeons you can run into, than the classic Diablo kind of formula has. But also I'm curious about what the effect on the pacing of the game is going to be with, like, it seems huge. Like, that map seems very, very big. And I don't know yet. And again, I'm so early that I can't tell how I'll feel about it. I don't know yet if that's going to have an overall positive effect on the game in terms of, does the additional sort of exploration and kind of the player's ability to choose where they go, does that add more to the game than what you lose by having the much more defined pacing of Diablo 2, Diablo 3? And that's something that I'm curious to see as I play more and how I feel about it. But right now I'm having a really good time. The Necromancer is incredibly fun. When I picked that class, the first thing I did is I went to the skill tree and looked if the Corpse Explosion was in there, which is the best skill in the history of video games. In Diablo 2, you have Corpse Explosion, where when you kill an enemy, they have their corpse on the ground, and you can blow their corpse up, and if it does enough damage, it will kill other enemies, because Diablo has like 100 little imp dudes that you're always fighting and stuff. It'll kill some of those imp dudes, and then you can blow up their corpses. It just make a chain reaction of blowing up the corpses of your enemies, and that was what I loved doing in Diablo 2. You can get that pretty early on as the Necromancer in Diablo 4, and there's a lot of stuff you can do to like really maximize that build. And the best part is that you do not use up mana when you use Corpse Explosion. All you do is use up corpses. That is the resource that you expend when you use Corpse Explosion. So far my playstyle is very much find the weakest dude in the group, kill him. I've got a bunch of skills then that debuff and like weaken the armor and stuff of all the other enemies, and I've got a thing called Corpse Tendrils that drags them all to one spot, and then I just start blowing up corpses, and then they start dying in one spot, and then they make more corpses that I keep blowing up. I just stand there and hammer on R1 as my skeleton dudes start shooting them, and then all the corpses blow up. And I did that for like 3 to 4 hours yesterday, and it's a good fucking time. So far I'm enjoying Diablo 4. I'll continue with this game. I know Final Fantasy 16 is also coming out very soon, so I don't know how I'm going to handle that, because I am also playing Street Fighter 6 at the same time, which is a lot of video game to juggle, but I am having fun.
Yeah, I mean, for some reason the industry decided all the biggest games of the year had to come out in a 4-week period. Very weird.
Yeah.
And kind of annoying, because yes, I want to play Diablo 4 as well. I'm behind on Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, and I want to go back to that. I'm in the middle of Street Fighter 6 and having the time of my life. Are you planning on playing Final Fantasy 16 when it comes out?
Yeah, I mean, I decided not to play the demo they released because I just wanted to play the actual game. So yes, I don't know how I'm gonna like figure out the pacing of jumping between these games, but I definitely want to play Final Fantasy 16.
Okay,
when it comes
then I will probably pick up Final Fantasy 16 as well, because if you're playing it, we can both play it and talk about it on the podcast. Diablo, I was thinking about picking up. My brother picked it up, and he's been playing it and loving it. So I've thought about picking it up to play with him, but I got too many games, and I'm working on other things. And Diablo will wait for me. Final Fantasy seems very interesting. I'm fascinated about that, so should be interesting. My piece of stuff, Sean, is just to update people on my progress here. I did finish the TV show Justified, which I've talked about a couple of times. You are right, Sean. The final season of Justified is a masterpiece. I think it's like easily seasons 2 and 6 are the best of that show. Mm-hmm. And the more I think about it, I might give the edge to season 6. I think like season 2 has maybe the highest little individual high points in the series, and it's got Mags Bennett, and it's just perfectly structured. But season 6 has like a lot of strong qualities as well, including Sam Elliott playing a villain, which, oh my god. And all of that is fantastic, but it is also just the immense payoff of this is a show that is building towards a certain set of things happening. And I think it has a very firm understanding of the characters and who they are and where they need to go. And when it's time for them to finally get there and kind of take off the shackles and tell the story through to its completion, it is so ludicrously confident. I think it's almost weird that like the Breaking Bad final season, which aired around the same time, is the one that gets talked about as like the legendary final season. And it is very good. The Justified final season is better, and to me is like the platonic ideal of how to do a final season of television. On through like a scene it ends on that I have like not stopped thinking about for the last week. It's unbelievable.
I mean, people always praise the writing in Justified because it's incredibly good, and specifically like the dialogue part of the writing, because obviously that's the thing that people love about Elmore Leonard's books. It's something that clearly like has translated really well to that show because it's got incredibly memorable dialogue. And you can tell because if you have watched Justified, you will never forget what the last line of that show is, like the last exchange between Raylan and Boyd. It is just like the most memorable piece of dialogue that so perfectly encapsulates everything about that show in one little statement. It is fucking incredible.
Yeah. If I can, like, I'm going to spoil the ending of Justified. For people who haven't seen it, fast forward, you can use the time chart. I'll tell you when you can go look at the notes, and it'll tell you when you can go ahead. But, like, that last season is so brilliant in so many ways. I think the thing that I expected of Justified near the end is that the final season would be a pretty straightforward Boyd steps into the role of the season villain, because every season of Justified there's a villain that both Boyd and Raylan are coming at from different like sides on different sides of the law. And I assumed the ending would be Boyd gets up to a point where he is now the crime kingpin of Harlan County and Raylan has to go after him. And that's not what they do. It's the villain in that season is the Sam Elliott character, Avery Markham, who is buying up parts of Harlan basically to transform it into his little marijuana empire and kind of destroy that city forever. And you have Boyd is doing villainous things, but it is essentially maintaining the dual protagonist structure that the entire season has had. And both of these men, Raylan and Boyd, are trying to get out of Harlan alive, as the song that is in every season tells us. And Markham is like the guy kind of in their way that they're maneuvering around. And it is so smart. And I think it's something this show really understands is that like the magic of Walton Goggins and Boyd Crowder is that he's never really straightforwardly the antagonist of the show. He's a bad guy very frequently, but he is much more, it is a dual protagonist structure about two people who both have objectives that kind of overlap and parallel. And I think it's basically that and up through the end. And I think it's really interesting how they do that. Because even at the end, like, their final confrontation is sort of less about either of them confronting the other than confronting some part of themselves that has held them back this whole time and overcoming it. So, Boyd refuses to give Raylan the easy out of, I'm going to raise my gun and make you put me down. And Raylan, tasked with that scenario, has to, figure out if he can overcome his, burning anger enough to let this guy go in handcuffs, which is obviously the right thing for him to do. And it's just, the show is, I think, so smart about, like, none of this is rocket science, but it's the kind of thing that I think a lot of shows just whiff on the 1 yard line because they think I think, have to overcomplicate or outthink the audience. And no, Justified, I think, from the pilot, it's pretty clear where it needs to go by the end, and it just goes there very entertainingly and very smartly and very soulfully, and that is a kind of like pleasure that I think is kind of underrated in TV these days.
Yeah, and I think one of the things there with that last season that makes it so good, and that other shows, and Breaking Bad to a certain extent kind of is like this, where you get that last season, and because it's like, okay, it's the last season and we know it, we're wrapping up the story, sometimes shows kind of abandon the fundamental narrative frameworks that they've used to get to that point because now we don't need them because we don't need to continue on for an unknown amount of time, right? And so it's like the shows become and feel very different because you're moving to super different places, and like, you know, something like the Breaking Bad finale where like lots of time passes and things like that, which is fine and good and can work really well. But I think there's something amazing about Justified doing exactly what you're saying there, which is like, it does not abandon or get rid of the fundamental narrative framework that the show has used up to that point, especially like season 2 onwards, because making Boyd the like capital B bad guy of the season would do that. It would make it a fundamentally different season of the show. And instead, season 6 is another season of Justified, but one that is allowed to make, like, to bring every character to a point of finality that doesn't need to be picked up in another season of the show. So it allows them to bring, particularly a lot of like the supporting characters, to a point that's much more definitive feeling, and stuff like that. Even if obviously we know there's the miniseries that we're going to get with Raylan and stuff, because like Raylan is just a character you can keep doing whatever you want with. But the show is able to sort of bring it to that final like period ending at the end. But everything that brings you up to that point throughout that final season is fundamentally using all the strengths the show has honed over those years. I think that is, if I had to pick my favorite season, I think I'm with you. I'd probably pick 6 for exactly that reason, of its ability to blend both. It's got all the stuff that makes any other season of the show amazing in a very kind of procedural fashion, while also managing to find a way to use that and leverage that to find the perfect way to end for like every major character on the show.
Yeah, I think that's so true. And, you know, I do think it is so thoughtful about where it pushes Raylan in the end. I think that final episode is really beautiful in kind of having him... This is another thing I like. It straightforwardly lets him be the hero. And I think, like, it understands that there are plenty of your anti-hero dramas, Sopranos and Mad Men and Breaking Bad, where, like, your main character can have some redeeming qualities, but is ultimately kind of a bad person, and the show knows that. And there's nothing wrong with that. I like that Justified Raylan is very flawed for much of the show, but he is a hero. He's the guy who goes in and saves the day, right? And like, at the end of the day, they let him grow to a point where in the final episode, he does heroic things. And I like that he does heroic things on both sides of the law. So he is like the good lawman in how he gets Boyd, and he does it right. And there's that great scene between Raylan and Art at the end of the finale, where Art is like, hey, I brought you here to bring in Boyd Crowder. It took longer than we thought it would take, but you did it, and you did it right. And it's that, and like, Art is proud that this fucking renegade, you know, cop he had on his payroll all these years finally did the right thing. But then there is the flip side of that, which is that Ava Crowder gets away, and Raylan does find her a couple of years later. And he covers for her. He does not bring her into the authorities. The final scene is him like basically lying to Boyd and telling her she died so that she can live a life free from all of this. And that is also the right thing to do and the heroic thing to do. And he owes her that because she got into a lot of shit because of stuff going on with him and Boyd. And she was going to be thrust back into prison for things she did not do. She did other bad things that maybe she should be in prison for, but the specific thing she was in prison for, she did not do. From all the season 5 junk. But like, he goes and he does the right thing there, and then he goes back to Boyd, and I think he is able to kind of like thread that needle there as well. And all of that, just, I like that you walk away from that show that this guy who has a lot of pain and like genuine traumatic abuse in his past, and I think the show is like very unflinching in how it portrays what his fucking horrible dad did to him and what his dad deserves, which is nothing. I like that the show never gets to a point of forgiveness because he doesn't deserve
Arlo
it.
does not deserve it. Yeah, he does not. And Raylan does not give it. Nor is it asked for. That is an amazing scene, their last scene together between Raylan and Arlo in the hospital or whatever, where it's just like, you think it's going to be your classic, oh, finally on the deathbed, the son and the father come to terms or whatever, and there's some kind of like reconciliation, and it's just like, yeah, no, fuck you. It's like, okay, yeah, fuck you too. Bye. It's like, fuck you, bye. Like, I can't wait until you're dead, old man, and then he leaves, and that's it. It's like fucking great.
It's fantastic, and in any case, he has all of these things in his past, but he's like the hero of an old western. He's an Elmore Leonard character. Elmore Leonard characters often are a little imperfect like this, but they get to where they're going, and I don't know. I liked all of that. It's not exactly a feel good ending, but it is like, I don't know. Raylan left Harlan. That is his like problem over the course of the show is, can he get out of this place that is going to kill him one way or another if he stays embroiled in this place. And he does. And he does with the knowledge that it will never leave him. That's the point of that final scene with him and Boyd. But he can go live a life. He can be a dad. He's not going to be a husband, seemingly, because he's bad at that. But he can go be a good dad. He can share ice cream with his daughter. I do love the payoff to Raylan is always eating ice cream. Is the final scene is him and his daughter having a cone. And Raylan's ex-wife being like, boy, you give her a lot of ice cream. And I'm like, of course he does. He's Raylan Gibbons. But yeah.
Yeah, like one effect I think you wasn't probably all the way there for you because you obviously know that Raylan survives because you already know that they're making a miniseries. But when I watched that last season, I had absolutely no idea. And that last episode, if you do not know if he's going to live or die, is the most stressful fucking TV finale I have ever watched. Because you very easily can imagine it going both ways. I mean, then there is the showdown between him and Boone, who is the fucking... I love Boone so much.
Boone is so great. Boone has to be the best... I came in at the last minute character in TV history because he's there for like the last 5 episodes. He exists purely so that Raylan can have one final quick draw, but he is perfect on that level. Like, what a great fucking character.
Yeah, I just love the, like, what if Travis Bickle from Taxi Driver got really obsessed with spaghetti westerns is who Boone is, and it's just the best fucking character. He's such a piece of shit. But you have that amazing last confrontation with Boone where you think, okay, like, it's over, like, Raylan's getting out, it's finally done, and then, oh shit, right, Boone is still here, he hasn't been dealt with, and you have your last gunfight. And there is this real sense throughout that whole last episode of, like, Raylan could get got, like, you could, it would totally work for the show. I don't think, like, it's a thing where if they had done that and they decided to kill Raylan, which I know is a thing that they considered doing, it was on the table, like, I think you could make that ending work. I think I prefer him living, but it is a thing where you feel the real threat of that character dying at the end, because you know it's the last episode. And the way that they do that showdown is so perfect where, you know, he gets grazed in the head, but when the way it's shot from the profile, it sure looks like his head just fucking explodes basically in blood. As he and Boone both draw down on each other. And then the slow camera pan to the hat with the hole in it and blood around it. Like, if they just cut to black there, honestly, that would be like still an all-time great TV finale in its own weird way.
Well, they're playing with the Western trope of the gunfighter who is ultimately killed by a younger version of himself, right? Because the other way you can imagine Boone is who Raylan would be if he went the path of Arlo, right? Like, just...
Yeah, if Raylan had never left Harlan in the first place, if he had stayed there the whole time, he would have absolutely grown up to be like Boone.
Yeah. And so that would work thematically. But it also, like, the show is so meticulous about things. It's such a great payoff because Raylan wears this big, dumb, ridiculous hat, and he wears it high. It's a Stetson that he wears high on his head. And Boone is a good shot, but Boone goes for the head. We are told this several times. We see some other, like, quick draws that Boone does. And Boone, like, Raylan tends to go for the chest because you have more room for error, right?
That's the thing you are supposed to do, right? It's like you're supposed to aim for center of mass. Like, he's been trained by the, like, feds, right, to shoot, and so he always goes. Basically, he's trying to aim for the heart, because if you hit the heart, it's over. But even if you get off by a little bit, you're going to hit something really fucking important. And so that's how he always shoots people.
Yes, but Boone goes for the head, and he does a good shot if Raylan wore a normal hat normally. But he wears a big hat high, and so it grazes his head and destroys. And the hat is the ultimate casualty of Justified, because he gets a different hat, which I did learn in an interview with Graham Yost. Apparently, Elmore Leonard always hated the hat. He thought the hat on Justified was too big, that Raylan would wear a Stetson, but a smaller, less ostentatious one. And so the hat that Raylan ends the show with is the one Elmore Leonard wanted, which I think is a cute little nod. Yeah. I am glad for City Primeval they've given him back the crazy Stetson, because Timothy Olyphant in that crazy Stetson cuts a nice figure. Yeah. It's amazing. But no, that final episode is about as good a finale as you can have. And then it all comes down to Walton Goggins and Timothy Olyphant and this beautiful acting duet where, like, this is a thought I had so many times over the course of the show. I know they're trying to kill each other for much of the run of the series, but the healthiest friendship on Justified is Raylan
And Boyd.
They love each other. They're just, whenever they get together, sparks fly. There's so much chemistry. Even when they're trading barbs, they enjoy it so much. They love being in each other's company. And even in this final scene, like, Raylan is lying to Boyd because Boyd has done horrible things that have... He should probably be in prison for the rest of his life, and he absolutely should never be allowed to go anywhere near Ava again. He has lost all of those privileges. But you know what? He and Raylan can still have a good time together for a couple of minutes, and there is this little bond there that Raylan is also finally able to just admit, it's never going away.
Yeah, they enjoy each other's company tremendously because, like, Raylan is the one person who can and always does cut through Boyd's bullshit, right? Like, Boyd is able to bullshit every other person in that show. Some of them, it takes a little bit more work than others, but, like, he is never able to bullshit Raylan. And you really feel that in their last exchange, and, like, Boyd enjoys that, and he has that line where he says, like, I know you never, he says it in a very more loquacious way, but it's like, I know you've never believed a word you've said that's come out of my mouth, I hope that you've always enjoyed hearing them.
Yes.
Again, he says it in a much more flowery manner because Boyd is the most poetically written character in the history of fucking American television. But it really does define so much of their relationship that it's like, yeah, Raylan doesn't believe anything Boyd has ever said ever in that entire fucking show, but he does enjoy hearing him talk. And
they dug coal together.
Yep, they dug coal together.
Oh, it's so good. Yeah, I also love the little hint that Boyd is in prison. And, I don't really believe in prison as a thing. I do think if such a person as Boyd Crowder existed, they are fundamentally antisocial enough that they should probably be removed from society.
Yeah.
But I like that Boyd kind of has a happy ending too, because we do see he is doing his preaching again, and he is having so much fun doing it, and it's hurting nobody. It's probably helping some of the inmates be better and rehabilitated, and he's having fun. It's like, okay, Boyd, this is probably the least harmful version of you, and I'm glad that you're living your best life here behind bars.
Yeah, and I love, because Raylan has that line where he just says, you do know you're repeating yourself, right?
Yes.
Because it's such a good ending for Boyd where it comes full circle, because Boyd has gone through all these different phases of things he goes through to try to, like, trick people and to kind of con them. And one of the second one, because the first one he did was the neo-Nazi stuff, but the second one that he was for most of season 1 was this kind of born-again Christian preacher guy. And the fact that he has cycled all the way back around to, like, I like to imagine that he probably went through a neo-Nazi thing again at some point in prison, and then he kind of spent up all that currency, and it's like, oh, not on to the preacher thing. And I think it is such a great way of both, it's very fun, but it also kind of, I think, shows you that there is a limit to who Boyd is, that, like, at a certain point, once you've conned everybody, what do you do with your life? It's like, there's something a little bit, like, sad and pathetic about Boyd, that this is where he's ended up, because it's like he's never learned to break out of who he is. He's never learned to, like, fully let all that down and be honest and kind of like an earnest, legitimate person. And he's always trying to find angles. He's always trying to play people. He's always trying to manipulate people, even himself. And he never finds a way to break out of that cycle. And he's just stuck doing it in, like, this very Sisyphean way in prison for presumably the rest of his life. Is a very sad but very appropriate end for that character.
And I mean, the final episodes of the show also strip away most of kind of the fun of the character and make him very ugly, because he gets to this point where all he has is the hustle to try to get this money and get out of Harlan, and there is none of the showmanship or any of that. And it is, I think, one of the most poignant things in the entire show is in the penultimate episode, they bring in Shea Wiggum, the great character actor, as this guy who Boyd hijacks his car. And eventually Shea Wiggum only has a couple of lines, but he's like, you don't know who I am, do you? And Boyd's like, why would I know who you are? And Shea Wiggum says, does the name X ring a bell? It's someone Boyd had killed in the past. And before Shea Wiggum can even go and tell Boyd who this person was, Boyd goes on this whole speech about how he doesn't care. I've heard this before. I'm the outlaw, goddammit, which is recurring, like a fun speech that he had in an earlier season. And then he just kills the guy. And it is like, there is as much as, like, there's that angry core of Raylan, there is that angry core of Boyd that is just so small and scared and sad. And it is one of the most brutal like poignant moments of the show.
Yeah, that also draws that line for the show of like, you know, with the title Justified. That's like one of the main lines that separates Boyd and Raylan, right? It's the classic Western thing of like, what's the difference between the outlaw and the sheriff? Because they're both, you know, gunning people down in the streets. But it's like, Raylan needs to have a justification for when he puts someone down. And it's like, that's how the whole show is set up, is he goes through ways to manufacture situations in which he is able to shoot people and be quote unquote justified in doing so. And so it's appropriate at the end of the show with his last confrontation with Boyd, he can't do it, right? There's like, Boyd will not let him have that excuse. And Raylan refuses to go over that line. And that's kind of where his character winds up. But it's, you know, Raylan needs a justification. He can't just gun people down. And he will do some crazy shit. He will basically organize a goddamn mob hit, which I think that's like season 4 is the ending of that one, where it's just like, I'm not going to kill you, but like, I'm not going to stop these other people from killing you. But Boyd doesn't need that, right? He doesn't need to be justified in what he does. He just does it, right? And you really feel it in season 6 because he kills multiple people. In season 6, it's just like he just kills them. He just shoots them in the back of the fucking head, and puts them down. Many of them for no particularly good reason. And that is the line, like that. Seeking that justification is the thing that separates the two of them.
Yeah. The other thing about season 6 is it feels like there was a fucking fire sale on character actors, and they were just trying to get them all out the door. We mentioned Sam Elliott. And Sam Elliott, has never been better. He's just incredible, and he's genuinely terrifying. Like, Avery Markham is a scary motherfucker. But you have him, you have Mary Steenburgen, you have Garrett Dillahunt, you have Jeff Fahey, you have Shea Wiggum in that one scene. It's just like they keep... the Shea Wiggum one made me laugh out loud, because I'm like, they've got one episode left, and they're just like, can we cram in any more great character actors? And it's so good, because it, like, just crackles how many people are in that season.
Yeah, it's fucking great. I'm so happy that you watched Justified, because it's such a good show. And that means we could watch the City Primeval and do a whole fucking podcast on it when that comes out.
Yes, absolutely. And I am excited. And again, they've started putting out full trailers for it. And, you know, it's going to be a very different show because it will not seemingly have the whole supporting cast. Although, they've got to have Jerry Burns in there, right? Because Wynn Duffy is from Detroit. That's his whole thing, is Wynn Duffy is from the Detroit Mafia. He's a Dixie Mafia guy out of Detroit. And I know, like, at the end of Justified, they say he had fled the country. But I don't know. I think they've got to have Jerry Burns in there somewhere. Because if we don't get, like, older Raylan Givens up against older Wynn Duffy, I'll be sad.
Yeah, Wynn Duffy is the classic example to me of like that TV show character that you can tell was only supposed to be in like a couple of episodes.
Yep.
But then it's like it's so good. He's such a like amazing character right off the bat that they just eventually just make him a full regular member of the cast. Yeah, Wynn Duffy is amazing. I just now having flashes to the scene where Mikey dies in season 6, which is maybe the saddest and most fucked up scene ever. Him just shouting Mikey as Mikey's choking the lady out and getting shot in the gut. But yes, I hope they bring Wynn Duffy back. He's he's like the cockroach of Justified. You can't get rid of him. Like, he's always going to find a way to weasel himself in to whatever situation is going on here.
It just feels like of all the characters that you could do like naturalistically in the show, I guess Raylan's ex-wife would be the easiest one because that's the mother of his child. And then it would be Wynn Duffy because he's in Detroit. And but I'm also excited because we're going to have Raylan's actual daughter, and where we have advanced the clock to where he has this like grown-up kid who is being played by Timothy Olyphant's actual real-life daughter, which is funny because you look at him like, oh my God, she looks just like Raylan. And I'm like, oh, well, there's a reason for that. No, it's great. But yeah, I am excited for that, and that is premiering in July. But Sean, should we talk about something that is just over the moon great and talk about Street Fighter VI for a little bit?
Yeah, because, I know that a lot of people have been going on and on about how Zelda's the greatest fucking game ever made, and it's the game of the year on lock, and they're all that shit. And then I'm over here, I'm like, you know what you can't do in Zelda? You can't fucking axe kick a motherfucker in the face. You can't make Chun-Li the wallpaper on your fucking cell phone. You can't text with Ryu in fucking Zelda. Street Fighter 6 is fucking amazing, Jonathan.
It's my game of the year right now. I'll say that just easily. It's unreal. At no disrespect to any other games, but you're correct. Tears of the Kingdom, I know you can make all these great contraptions. You cannot have text conversations with Cammy where she is testing out emojis with you.
Go take cat pictures for her as like a secret cat spy, man. So good.
So I have finished the campaign. I still have like some of the extra fighters out in the world to do who are like level 90 and I absolutely cannot beat yet.
Yeah.
But other than that, I did all the side content and everything. It took me about 30 hours to beat the campaign, and then I've played some other stuff. I did arcade mode last night with Cammy, and that was a blast. I did Cammy, if you can't tell, she has like kind of become my main. She was the one I got all the way to the end on in the campaign in terms of getting all of her moves and everything, and she's just my favorite. Totally in love with her. She's on my phone. And then, like I said, I did that. I did some combo trials with her. So I've started poking around at everything else in the game, and it is like a ludicrously feature-rich package. But overall, like this game, it is so creative, it is so fun, it is so charming. It is a game that is so, I think, in love with its own world and sense of humor and tone, and makes you want to love it too, and gives you so many ways to express that. And then also at the heart of it is just this ludicrously deep fighting system that I think any skill level you come in with, you'll come out having this really profound appreciation for what is going on here, because it just never gets old.
Yeah, it's so much fun, because I think I'm in the same spot that you are with the game, where I finished World Tour mode a little bit ago, and then I've been messing around doing combo trials, experimenting with characters. Cammy is a personal favorite. I mean, she was destined to be, and I knew this going in, she's voiced by Miyuki Swashiro, so of course, it's like, it must be, the main characters I've played a lot with is Cammy, Chun-Li, Ryu, of course, because Ryu is the guy I always played in old Street Fighter games. I've played a little bit of like Manon and Juri Han, but Chun-Li and Cammy, I think, are the two main characters I've put the most time in. And that's one of the things that I love about Street Fighter 6 is I've always found some of those characters, particularly Chun-Li, to be a little bit impenetrable for me, because Chun-Li has the hold moves that those inputs are a little like trickier to time and stuff than your standard Ryu shit you can do. And I loved the choice that they made her the second fighter you get in the main story mode in World Tour, so I used her a lot, and I really came to love like playing these much faster characters like her and Cammy, where you're very aggressive, you've got a lot of different options. Like, I love it, every character in the game has just like fucking a dozen special moves. Like, everyone has so many different moves and stuff they can do, and all these unique normal inputs that I'm sure Street Fighter 5 and 4 have a lot of that stuff, but I've mostly only played the old pixel Street Fighter games, and so this is like, there's a lot more you can do with the characters. In World Tour mode means that like you have so much time to spend playing the game, because you're like grinding out all these levels and doing the story stuff and hanging out with the characters and having fun doing all that kind of ancillary stuff. But that means you're also just engaging with the fights so much in these little kind of bite-sized packages, and it really is like the best mode I've ever seen in a fighting game to getting you to learn how to play a fighting game on like a very fundamental level, where even if you're not, figuring out the most elaborate combos on your own, because that's like very hard to do, the way that Street Fighter is set up is that like you don't need to be able to do a big 10-hit combo that you figured out how to chain together with a drive rush and so on and so forth. You've every single move in your arsenal. Like, if you can chain together like a little 3-hit combo that ends with a Hadouken or something, like that does a good amount of damage, and like that is enough damage for you to be able to like effectively win fights. And so, you are really incentivized to think about, when you're playing the AI, thinking about the mind game and the psychological aspect of the fighting games, and the spacing and the timing, and trying to bait moves and read what your opponent is doing. And I think the AI is so well designed to like, they're not so hard that you like, even on like some like the harder stuff that the main like game will get to near the end, where they're like clearly on a harder difficulty, where it feels like you're just that it never feels cheap, I guess. But it is also something where you're like, okay, it's a little bit more realistic than what old fighting game AI felt like. They have enough where you can see the patterns, and they tend to have certain characters tend to do certain moves that you can pick up and realize, okay, I need to develop a counter for that, or I know if I space out this way, I can bait this move, and that allows me to punish this way, which are all things that's like the basics of fighting games. And I think like the AI is designed in that kind of perfect Goldilocks realm for me, where it really gives you the space to learn the game while like putting enough pressure on you as a player that you actually have to learn it and you can't cheese it all the time. And it is just an amazing feat of game design, I think, that I imagine a lot of like really old school, high level fighting game players are not going to be able to see playing World Tour mode, because if you're already there with it, you're never going to be able to see what it is doing to teach players. But for us who are effectively like fighting game novices, like it is amazing to me how effective it is at getting you to think about and engage with the deeper mechanics of Street Fighter on a level I have never even gotten close to before this game.
Me too. I could not agree more with that. And for me, it is like, this is another thing where I think the modern controls are really helpful for me personally, because I've always just struggled with the basic inputs of it. But what the modern controls do is they clarify the inputs, but they don't do anything to simplify the mind game of the fights, right? Mm-hmm. They don't do anything to simplify things like just your basic kind of spacing and timing and all of that. So it just, for me, like all of that combined with the way the game doles out all of its movesets and everything, I really had this feeling of almost like learning a language or something. You start with one piece and you use that a lot, and then you build on that and build on that. And eventually I was seeing elements of Street Fighter and of the fighting genre in general, which has always been really tough for me, that I'd never gotten, like getting into the mind game, really watching the opponent. And like the animations in this game are so beautiful and readable and legible and all of that. But really reading that and considering like, okay, maybe this is where I use a drive counter. Maybe this is where I use I guess the drive counters are like the drive gauge punch kind of thing. Maybe this is where I'm going to, go down and to the left. Like this is where I'm going to jump. Oh, but if I jump here, they can do that. But if they jump, I have this move. And like really getting into all of that strategy that I think had been obscured for me in the past. And by the end, like, I'm not going to go win a Street Fighter championship, but I can play the fucking game. I feel like it's like learning an instrument would probably be the best sort of allegory, I think, where like by the end I'm not going to go play in a concert, but for myself I could like play a little ditty on this, and I feel like I'm doing that, and it's cool. I know how to play the game, and I can appreciate when it's tough and why it's tough and what's interesting about it. And there's a couple of times in the game where I would have a tough fight and I just kind of found myself falling into a little bit of a flow state where I felt like everything slowed down and I could see the Matrix. And the only comparable experience I've ever had with that in a game is Sekiro, when I finally understood Sekiro and got decent at it. And I think this has a very similar feel. But most fighting games are not laid out to give you that progression sense, the way a Sekiro is, of start small and build up until you're suddenly seeing the Matrix. It's just the modes, and they're there, and there's lots of ways you can play with it, but you're not going to have that sort of progression encouraged. And World Tour does that really beautifully, with lots of space to experiment and find out who your favorite fighter is and what moveset speaks to you. You talked about the ones that worked for you. Cammy was my main one, but E Honda was my other one, who I got almost all the way up, and I love that man. He's my hero. DJ was the other one. I won the first tournament in the game using DJ's style. Really loved him. So it's so cool. It's not just learn the game, but it's like learn the game on your own terms with which fighter speaks to you.
And being encouraged to really experiment with that World Tour mode and learning all the different special moves and stuff and kind of how to fit them together. And it was really fun to, by the end of the game, have this sort of Frankenstein's Street Fighter character where you're kind of matching all these different moves together, because you can't. And at first I didn't love this decision, but it made sense to me once I had more moves, where you can't actually like totally recreate any individual fighter with their moveset with your created character, because you can't overlap inputs. So you can't have so for Ryu, for instance, has a quarter circle forward punch, is Hadouken, the most basic bitch Street Fighter fighting game move ever, the Hadouken. But he also has a move that I assume probably they must have added at some point that is not in the old games, where he has a quarter circle forward kick move, which is this big lunging kick attack that you can use to bounce people off the fucking wall and shit, which is very cool. And Ryu is a much more kind of complex and interesting character here than he is in old games, because he's got some of these other moves. but you can't give your created character both of those moves because they have, even if they're one is punch, one is kick, they have overlapping inputs. I suspect that might have something to do also with like the way the modern controls are set up, but also the end result of that is you can't just like max out Ryu's style and just put on all of his moves and just be Ryu. It's not possible. So instead, you have to think about, okay, well, what are other moves I can pick from the other characters I've played as to like fill out and supplement my overall kind of repertoire. It's one of the reasons why I also suspect they made Chun-Li one of the first character like masters you get, because her spinning bird kick and her Tensho kicks are very unusual inputs, at least on like classic controls, where it's spinning bird kick is hold down up kick, and then Tensho kicks is down down kick. There's no other move that does down down kick. So whoever you're playing as, you can always have Tensho kicks on. Most other characters don't have a spinning bird kick style input, so you can always have that with you basically. But by the end, I had like some Cammy moves, I had some Ryu moves on, I had some Chun-Li moves, I had the big like half circle back throw that Manon has, which was something I had for most of the game because it's a input I think she only has. And there was something really fun
Honda
about
has one like it, and
Yes.
I had hers on everybody first, and then Honda's I was putting on basically any version of the character I had, because it's the same kind of thing. It's this quick grab you can do that's much more powerful than a normal grab hold, and it's really cool.
And so like by the time I got to that last tournament, there was something so fun about being like, okay, I've like really made my own unique character. Because most of the game, when I was bouncing around to the different masters, I was trying to replicate their moveset as close as possible. And then at a certain point I realized, okay, no, I should like really be like the mode wants you to try to piece things together as you're leveling up. And once you get multiple masters really high level, then you've got a lot of different tools to play with and really kind of figure out exactly what you want to do. And I had a lot of fun with that.
Yeah, I did too. I kind of was switching between near the end my kind of fully fleshed out sort of Cammy build that I had that was all the way leveled up, and then my E-Honda one, which I still like on E-Honda and some of the other ones I was playing with. I still had Cammy moves in there because she has that aerial kick she can do where you jump up in the air and come down with this diagonal kick that a lot of characters don't get any aerial moves like that, or at least they don't early on. I played everybody up to like level 5 or 10, but past that point is when the curve gets steeper. But I would put that on a lot of characters because it's always very useful. It's a way to kind of like get up in the air and come down quickly and make up ground and get in close. Yeah. And that would become kind of part of my strategy. But yeah, it's fun because Cammy is super quick and E-Honda is a big, slow sumo wrestler. And it was very fun for me to start combining pieces of those two, because normally you wouldn't think those would go together, but it's fun to find ways where you can do that. Absolutely. And yeah, I love that sort of level of expressiveness. I love how many pieces you have by the end to play with is an absolute joy. And again, by the end, you've been introduced to it in a sufficiently immersive but also progressive way that you feel you have a handle on the possibilities.
Yeah. So and it's always like really exciting when you're like, okay, I think I'm ready to move on to a different sort of base moveset and like try this character's style and be like, okay, shit, I need to like relearn how to play the game, because obviously the most important thing is all your normal moves, which is determined whoever's base style you're using. And I got into a habit of at that point, when I was ready to move on, because basically I would get a character up to level 20 and then I would move on to a new style and like incorporate some of the stuff I learned from them. And when I would do that, I would they have a thing called the character guides, which is like a more basic version of the combos. That just goes through for every single character. They've got a bunch of just things of where they run through, here's their moveset, here's like all their specials and their super arts, here's like all their like really notable, unique, normal inputs. And then I really love that they have like a couple of, here's the basics of like, philosophically, how is this character meant to be played? And I that probably has been in some other fighting games. Like there's obviously combo trials are in a lot of fighting games, and you have a lot of like very basic character explanation stuff. But I really liked those character guides as just a quick like 5 to 10 minute primer on here is how we envision this character being played, and here's like some of the basics of use their like standing kick as a poke at mid-range, use their like crouch medium as an opener into combos. Like, oh, here's with like Jurihan, she's got like her forward heavy punch, which I love with Jurihan. All of her punch moves are just kicks, which is like very funny to me. So it's like you kind of have to break your brain a little bit, because when you do a punch input, she still kicks them because all she does is kick. But her forward heavy kick does this 2-hit move that you can interrupt with one of her specials. And that's like all stuff that you would never know unless the game explained it to you, or somebody told you, or you just played so much of the character that you happened to do those inputs in a row, or you get deep enough into the combo trials that you get a combo that does that specific combination. But there's something about it just saying like, yeah, no, just try this shit out. Like, go, like, use some of these as pokes, use this as an over combo. Here's like some basic shit you can do. Here's like the idea of how the character's meant to be played. Now go have some fun with it in World Tour mode. Like, it's the most I've ever used that kind of tutorialization in a fighting game. Mostly because it's like, I have a very nice, comfortable way to then go experiment with the stuff you've given me, rather than here's like the basics of how you kind of play this character. Anyways, now go jump online with someone who's been playing this franchise for 30 years. And
right.
is like, and is like won like money at local tournaments and shit. It's like, well, shit, I'm never going to be able to actually learn how to do this stuff because my basics aren't there. And it's like this game gets you with those basics there, so that other tutorialization that exists in this game, that again, I'm pretty sure other fighting games have stuff like that, but here it feels really useful because I'm actually able to put it into practice in a very low stress environment.
Yeah, no, totally. And I just, every place I poke at this game, I think I'm finding more depth and more fun and more personality. One of my favorite, like, just to back off of the fighting for a second, the overall just presentation of this game is so cool. There's so much great stuff with the characters themselves. Like, the story in World Tour becomes pretty gibberish by the end and ends on effectively a cliffhanger. I feel like I don't know if we're going to do DLC or something at some point.
Well, the DLC characters are going to be in the World Tour modes. Like, when they add Akuma, like, you'll be able to go, like they have said, they'll put them in the World Tour mode and you'll be able to go visit them and then learn their moves and stuff. I don't know if that means there'll be more elaborate stuff with them, but the bare minimum, you'll be able to go, like, take them on as masters and stuff, which is cool.
That makes me very excited, because what's the like true attraction of World Tour is how beautifully it does stuff with all of the characters, where just they have so much personality, the writing is so on point, the cutscenes are fantastic, and then honestly my favorite stuff is just as you level up with one of the masters and you get to know them, the texting is the hardest I feel like I've ever laughed at a video game. Some of that is so fucking great. I love that E Honda just has his own sumo emoji that he's made, and he sends that to you, and that's hilarious, and you send responses to them. But then also the art pieces that you get. There is so much art in this game, just tons of it. And I realized playing arcade mode last night, of course, then there's a bunch more art that is in the arcade mode for everybody's individual story. But there's all this gorgeous hand-drawn and colored art, and it is often funny, and it is sometimes poignant, and sometimes it's just cool. And boy howdy, I need them to make a big, expensive art book for this game, just with all of that stuff printed on, like, art paper, because I will buy that at the day fucking one. I want it so bad. But just going through the art gallery itself is, like, worth the price of admission for me with this game.
Yeah, I loved getting to the end of Ryu's thing, because I got to level 20 with him, and 100 bomb level or whatever. We're bros, basically, is what I'm saying. And when you get to the end, you get this really nice piece of art where so much of Ryu's story in this is like, this is the latest point in the Street Fighter timeline, which for people who don't know, like, and even though I haven't, like, gotten super deep into these games, this is the kind of thing where I like to go on wikis and learn about what the fuck is going on in the story of Street Fighter. So it's like, I know some of the basics, but, like, a lot of the franchise for a very long time bounced around and went backwards with, like, the alpha games, and I think Street Fighter 4 is set between Street Fighter 2 and 3 and stuff like that. But Ryu is, like, at the end of his journey. Well, not, he's not at the end of his journey. He's still trying to get stronger, but he has this, like, Dragon Ball Super era Goku kind of thing of like, oh, he's a master now. Like, he has reached the level of mastery that he's overcome the Satsui no Hado, which is like, his own kind of like ego and all this kind of stuff. And so at the end, you just get this really beautiful piece of art that's Ryu with his design in Street Fighter 6 standing there calm in the middle, and then you have this kind of like all these images surrounding him of what brought him to this point, and there's like him training with Ken with his master Goki, and then you've got him meeting Sakura, his another Street Fighter character who's kind of like a Ryu fangirl. You've got an image from the Alpha games where he is doing the Shoryuken on Sagat, who's the boss in the Alpha game stuff, and there's a whole story thing there. And then the bottom right, you see him and Guile and Chun-Li fighting M. Bison / Vega, if you're going by the Japanese names, who is dead at this point in the Street Fighter 6 timeline. And there's just like this real sense of, oh, Ryu has been on this whole journey, right? He's not this kind of young hotshot martial artist anymore who is like obsessed with this stuff. There's like a level of like Zen peace he's arrived at, which is also communicated in his big cutscene where he's sitting there meditating with the Sakura petals flowing around him, which is an amazing image. But there's something, it's, you know, it's not like, you know, The Last of Us or something. It's not this incredible dramatic story you've gone on, but there is something so effective about the characters. And some of these characters like Ryu and Chun-Li are so iconic that if you barely know anything about a Street Fighter, you know who those characters are. And I do think the writing and that artwork and all that is so well done that it did have like a weird emotional impact on me to see. It's like, oh, like Ryu's in this like really nice place and he has found this level of peace within himself that is really cool. And like so many of the characters are like that, and just like have these cool little, whether they're funny little beats or little kind of poignant moments of reflection. Like Juri's is one of the best. If people have not done Juri stuff, hers is amazing because she is the best texter. Her texting is fucking hilarious in that game. But her whole story is like she was a like bad guy in Street Fighter 4 and 5, and she wanted revenge on M. Bison and Shadow Lu and all that stuff. Shadow Lu's like the evil organization in Street Fighter, but they're all basically destroyed. And so she's like lost her purpose because all that's over. She has no one left to get revenge on. And I didn't know really anything about Juri other than that she was a bad guy before playing this game. And like they do a good job of kind of getting you into who she was. She tells you all this stuff about like how her parents were killed, but then she says, haha, like I'm just lying, like what you believe, that sappy bullshit. But obviously she's telling you the truth. She just can't like admit it. Because she can't have friends with people, but she wants to have a friend really bad. And there's something about that I was like kind of moved by her like little story in the sense of kind of like apathy and aimlessness she has because she has no real purpose. So she's just running around kicking the shit out of people because she has no bigger goal to work towards. And I haven't done her arcade story mode yet, but it's one of the first ones I want to go do because I found her like character writing so effective, and the character design is really cool, and the voice actress for that one I think is Katamura Eri, who's like Kei-Ching in Genshin Impact, and she does a great job. And so like top to bottom, all those characters that I've gone and like done all the training with, which there's a lot of them I haven't yet, all the characters I've really loved, whether they're old returning classics or they're brand new characters for this game like Manon, all of them have been so cool.
Absolutely, yeah. And I have very little experience with this cast beyond just knowing Ryu and Ken from stuff. And I just found myself falling in love with like basically every character I met. And I, you know, eventually want to go back in World Tour and get further along with all of their stories, because I did Juri up to like level 7 or 8 or something, and she's really cool. And yeah, she seems a little more like technical. I'm like, I want to learn a little bit more about the game before I play her. But definitely, like everyone I was running into, I was having fun with. And this is something that, you know, the reason I think the fighting game I've always drifted towards most was Soul Calibur is I think Soul Calibur has, for me, historically been the one that is best at just kind of like putting the characters front and center and letting them, their weirdness and their oddity and all of the fun things that make them unique kind of just be out there and have fun with that. But I think Street Fighter 6 takes the cake on that in a million different ways, where it's just, it really wants you to like come to love this cast. It wants them to all be characters above and beyond anything in their moveset or any of that. Like it wants you to go play with and experiment with all of the characters because they're cool characters and you like their personalities and their voices and their animations and their stories and all of that stuff. And that will drive you to want to learn more about how they play. But I think a lot of fighting games start with the sort of how they play and build on that. And this one feels like it really is character-centric. And there's so many cool ways the characters express themselves. This is such a goofy thing they did, but I fucking love the versus screen when you're starting up a one-on-one match, and you can use the D-pad and choose one of like 4 expressions, and the facial animations are so ridiculously detailed. It's incredible. I love that stuff. Yeah,
these are like the best looking character models. It is, all the characters look great. You can tell that like the Capcom really invested a lot in good muscle tech, because the muscles in this game look fucking amazing. Like just like how they deform underneath the skin, and you can see all the detail. Like particularly like it's on Ryu's the Shin Shoryuken, his level 3 super, where it like really gets in super close on his arm as he's winding up this big uppercut, and you just see everything flexing. It just looks fucking great. Yeah, it is just in all the animations, whether they're the little facial things in there or like in the cinematics, and then obviously in the actual gameplay, the animations, which has always been true of Street Fighter, are just like unworldly good. Both in terms of just like gameplay readability, all of it's super clear, but it's fun to just go into training mode with a character and just look at all their animations and just like play with like just like, oh, what does their like jumping kick look like? What is their, and you can in training mode you can put on like slow-mo, so you can like really look at like all the detail of how this character does like a big spinning kick. Or one of my favorite animations is Ryu's backwards heavy kick, is a like big axe kick that goes up. He's had this in a bunch of moves or a bunch of games where he kicks up and that's one hit, the axe kicks down, that's a second. And all of the like detail, the way his body has to like rotate and pivot, like the physical mechanics that they've thought through to animate for all those different moves are so detailed and so well considered, while also having to be really like precise and snappy for gameplay reasons. Like Capcom has always been the best in the business at this, whether it is their pixel art games from back in the day, or even all their when they moved to polygons and 3D models with Street Fighter 4. I don't love the overall aesthetic of 4 and 5 all that much, but the animation stuff has always been fucking impressive in those games in a way that other 3D fighters I don't think have ever been quite as good at that, particularly ones that are on a 2D plane.
Yeah. And just on a graphical level, World Tour is a little simpler because it's, you know, doing something very different than the main game with this big open world that you're running through. And so there's some cutbacks and some cheaper parts. But when you go into like the fighting ground and you're doing the normal one-on-one stuff or arcade mode or anything like that, this is as impressive a graphical showcase as anything on the PS5. It is stunning how good it looks just in the normal fights. Every one of those arenas, there's so much detail going on, and those backgrounds like stretch back into infinity. There's just these full 3D boxes behind you with so many reactive elements, and then everything going on with the fighters and the space between them, and all the stuff you're describing of the muscle tech and all of their clothes and everything like that. It really is like, it feels next gen. It's one of those things where I look at the main sort of fighting stuff and it did feel like a leap going from playing 30 hours of World Tour to then going into arcade mode and stuff and going, oh, this is the actual game, and this is PS5. This is next gen. This looks crazy. And I know from Eurogamer, Digital Foundries, their analysis, some of what you're praising, those are the places they had to cut back for like the PS4 version of this, is stuff like some of the muscle tech and some of those animations. Like, I think it's all there in terms of like basic readability, but some of the like actual detail had to be cut back. And it's really awe-inspiring. I also love how many of the figures populating the backgrounds on the maps in Fighting Ground are characters you met and interacted with in World Tour. So I know all these people. I know the Andore brothers and their dad, and I know the big dude from the city who's the head of the Mad Gear guys. And then I go and fight in that map on the Fighting Ground, and they're there in the background cheering us on, and I was like, this is so cool. Like, how many fighting games, Smash Bros a little bit, but how many fighting games is the background just populated with characters you've come to know and love? It's so cool.
Yeah, there's like, and like so much of that stuff is also pulled from the fucking Final Fight games, which is a franchise I've like messed around with, but I don't know in a super detailed way. It's like enough that I know like Mike Hagar, I can recognize some of the more famous kind of enemy characters like Poison. But there is something really cool about like all of those people are from Final Fight. Like the Andore brothers and all that stuff. And so then they have Final Fight in there. So if you want to go see those people in their original form, you can go into Metro City and they have Final Fight, which again, in my mind, that's just a documentary. Like, that's not a video game. Like, you're just watching the documentary of when Mike Hagar defeated the Mad Gears and saved Metro City. That's what it is like in that world. But yeah, that stuff is amazing. Also, while we're on like some of this production stuff, I do want to shout out the soundtrack is also fucking incredible.
God.
The music is so good. In any area you have it, like it's very different in some ways than kind of some of the classic Street Fighter. Like they're not leaning on the classic Street Fighter themes, which are obviously amazing. But I like the much more kind of like, you know, the music in this game is less in your face when you're fighting. It's not about like big, really memorable melodies, but it's more about like the vibes, and it's got that hip hop quality. And so many characters have these just like really great themes. It's great music to put on the background. If you just like bring up Ryu's theme on YouTube and stuff like that. But in particular, the one I want to shout out, because it's like there's no reason why they had to go so fucking hard here, but it gives you flashbacks for me of like the character select screen from Marvel vs. Capcom 2, I Want to Take You for a Ride, one of the most iconic songs in the history of video games. For Street Fighter 6, it's the fucking World Tour like map select screen when you go to like the pick where you're going to go on the plane, and it's just this fucking rap song comes on, and it's like the best thing this side of Lotus Juice. It is so fucking good. Every time that comes on, like I always wait a little bit longer before I select where I'm going to go, because I want to get through like the first opening like verse part before I end up in France or wherever I'm flying to. It's every single time that song comes on, I get hyped as fuck.
I couldn't agree more. And man, I sat there and watched the entire end credits at the end, and they're very long, just because it plays all the music, and then near the end you get the full version of that rap that is in the map screen, and that was so fun. No, it's presentationally, this game is just immaculate. I think it's got this great cartoony quality, but with enough of sort of that realism on the characters that they can do all the cool muscle depth and all of that kind of stuff you're talking about. It's a really good middle ground, I think. It in a lot of ways, it does feel like, looking at the pixel art of like Street Fighter 2 or something, it feels like a lot of those kind of design aesthetics just come to life in 3D, and I think they've had so much fun with it. Top to bottom, this game it's incredible for me, and it's very rare, I feel like, I can play a game and have the joyous experience of just discovering an entirely new genre. But that is what Street Fighter 6 has done for me. And again, it's been a long time since I feel like I've played a game and like fell in love with a new type of video game. And obviously Street Fighter and fighting games have been around for a long time. They just haven't quite been accessible to me. And I hope a lot of games learn from this. I know Smash Bros. Is nebulously a fighting game, because you do fight, but it's different than obviously a Street Fighter or something. Yeah. But if they ever do make another Smash Brothers game, they need to do some kind of campaign like this one has. Can you imagine World Tour from Street Fighter 6, but populated with Nintendo characters?
And being able to go, mentor under Sonic the Hedgehog and get his spin dash move and shit like that. Yeah, that'd be pretty fucking great.
There's so much possibility with that. This game is so cool.
Yeah, one last note I want to talk about, just because you reminded me about it because you mentioned the ending credits. I fucking love the ending credits of this game. They show you all these images from the cutscenes throughout the game, but like with a filter on them that make them like kind of have like a graphic hand-drawn look. But the best part is that they don't like render your character from how they look when you beat the game. It's from what were they like at that moment that you were in the cutscene. So it's like if you were like me and you were like, I regularly changed up the look of my character, sometimes pretty dramatically, just in terms of the clothes, depending on who I was studying under. So like when I was studying under Manon, I like made my dude look like fucking Helmut Kruger basically from Hitman, like a fashion model, runway fashion model, because that's Manon's whole vibe. When I was with Jury, I had a really great look where I had like these ripped jeans, like distressed jeans with I forget what this kind of jacket is called, or like vest, but it's like the 80s style vest that like Marty McFly has on that almost looks like a life preserver. I had that, but no undershirt, so it's just that and like sandals, and it's like 80s twink with like sunglasses. It was a real good look. And just getting to see these flashes of like my dude starting out looking like a dope training with Luke, and it's like, okay, here's where I got like normal pants in like a green shirt, and it's like there's where I'm starting to get my fashion game. Okay, now here's where I'm looking like all my different masters. And then the look I had for the end of the game I loved, which was I went full on like if you found a like weird, obscure 80s action movie like VHS tape at a Goodwill. It's like my dude was like the main character in that because he had the ripped jeans, he had combat boots on, he had a black tank top and like fingerless gloves and aviator sunglasses. And so it's just like a real fucking like Arnold Schwarzenegger 80s like commando vibe going on. And it matched so perfectly with everything at the end of that game, which goes weirdly dark. I don't know why the World Tour mode is such a dark tone, but there's a whole shot where like there's a giant explosion and like fire up behind your dude, and my guy looking like a corny 80s action man really fit with that whole vibe. And I loved just like seeing the journey of my character through all those cutscenes, including like as he looked more and more ridiculous over the course of the game as I went further afield with the fashion I chose for him. There is something it's one of my favorite end credits I've seen in a long time in a game. I thought like that was a very well thought through. I imagine it probably wasn't even that hard for them to do, but it like really was an effective way to kind of sum up the journey of my character.
Absolutely. And if Street Fighter VI had nothing else going for it, just playing dress up with your ridiculous creative character is, as you're talking about, so ludicrously fun. I spent so much time making costumes for my guy. It really felt like I was a little kid playing with action figures and dolls, just dressing him up, because I had so many good looks. I had a big red leather jacket with pink slacks at one point and like basically a bandana around my bald head, and that was cool. I had, near the end, I got a big leather trench coat like Neo in the Matrix, and I had that with red leather pants and black gloves and like, you know, the sunglasses, so he looked like he was an agent but with red leather pants. That was fun. And then near the end, I won in a fight right before the last tournament, like a sumo robe that was like a big robe that a sumo wrestler would wear that had like a blue flower pattern and looked really cool. And I basically took off everything and just, well, I had, you have the gear appearance thing, so I was doing this on gear appearance. I had that, and I had like wooden clogs, and I used E Honda's style in the final tournament, and it just was like so perfect for that. And it's just, I love how many ways you have. Again, it's all about expression, right? This is a fighting game that I think realizes the core actual fighting mechanics are so varied and diverse and deep that they themselves allow for a lot of expression. And how can we, you know, extend that expression to the characters and the art and the world and the music and the playing dress up and all of that? It's such a cool feedback loop.
Yeah, it's just an amazing game. Like, it is, you know, I'm not a fighting game expert, so this is like coming from a novice opinion, but this is like far and away from me the best fighting game I've ever played, like as a whole package. And like as a whole package, and also just the experience of playing it. Like, I've never had this much fun with a really more subdued style game, right? Most of the fighting games I go to are either Soul Calibur, if you're doing full 3D, that's the one I like, or it's the more crazy like Marvel vs. Capcom 2, Dragon Ball FighterZ, where you have like all these crazy super moves going off and like giant combos, where like, you know, you need to do like a weird 15-hit combo, but because of the way the inputs are designed, that's a lot easier to do in those games than Street Fighter. Like, that's kind of where I've mostly kind of leaned towards with this genre. And I enjoy Street Fighter here and there, but like I said, the only character I ever like could figure out how to play on a basic level was Ryu. Like, every other character, just I couldn't figure out really how to play with those games. And so here, being able to learn all the other characters and really kind of see, okay, this is what is really appealing about a game where a 3-hit combo feels like an achievement. Like, there's something so cool about that. And it's just top to bottom, this game is amazing. And it is my current front runner for Game of the Year, which was not, like, I was excited for this game. I was not expecting that level, though.
Yeah. And also, just to talk about the renaissance of Capcom for a second, it just struck me with how gorgeous this game is. The RE engine, which is their internal engine that they introduced with Resident Evil 7, which was the first-person one, that engine has been used on first-person shooter/horror games like Resident Evil. It has been used on third-person shooter/horror games like the 2, 3, 4 remakes, Devil May Cry 5, Monster Hunter Rise, the one that basically brought a full open-world Monster Hunter to Switch and then is now on PC, and now Street Fighter 6, and they're coming up with more stuff that's kind of even more off the beaten path. It's insane. Like, usually I feel like in a company's own internal engine, like usually when they try to push it to this many things, you get like what the Frostbite fiasco over at Blizzard, right? Or EA, sorry, where it's just everyone is trying to make this engine made for one specific thing work and it doesn't work and brings down the company. This, like, whatever they've done with the tech behind that engine has opened that company up to a crazy creative renaissance, and it is wild.
Yeah, it's very interesting to see, like, well, so many companies are, like, flocking to Unreal, and at this point moving on to Unreal Engine 5, and we're, like, really losing, broadly speaking, the like, multiple engine thing that has been kind of the norm. Not entirely, obviously, in particular, like, lots of Japanese studios are still carrying on with their proprietary engines, but it's nowhere near as common as it used to be. It's interesting to see, like, how successful Capcom has been with the RE engine, because one of the things that has motivated the push towards Unreal is that games are so expensive to make, and you need so many people working on them if you're working this big AAA space, that it is very useful to have an engine. Hey, I can hire X developer from ABC company, and all of them will have some experience working on Unreal because it's so common, and stuff like that. And it's just very costly to try to design your own tech and build that up internally. And as you say, often sometimes it can end up with really negative results, because if it's not well designed, or you're pivoting this engine to work on a game it wasn't really optimized for, you could end up in a EA scenario from last generation where they just kind of flailed. But you can see, like, it can really pay dividends if you get it well, and you've got really good engineers working on it, and it's a robust thing. You can get what, like, Capcom's been doing, where you get multiple really high quality games across a wide range of genres that also, like, feel different than your UE engine games, right? Like, it feels like they have a different taste, a different flavor than, like, every other game that is just built on Unreal. And there's something really awesome about that. Obviously Unreal Engine 5 seems really cool. I'm sure it's, like, a really useful thing for developers. But but these Capcom games are a reminder that there is something to be had about companies building up some of this kind of tech and figuring out what works best for them. Because if it works, it makes something that's really unique in the end.
And it's clearly, I think, reinvigorated the company in terms of everybody kind of working together towards these different diverse goals within, right? Like, this is to make Capcom-ass games, and they're back to being, like, the best version of themselves. This is, like, golden era Capcom experimenting in a million directions and having fun, and not really trying to match the rest of the industry, I don't think, just doing their own thing, and in so doing, kind of one-upping the rest of the industry, which is super cool. Because, I think my 2 or 3 favorite games of the year, 2 of them are Capcom, and one of them is Nintendo with Tears of the Kingdom, but RE4 and Street Fighter VI are the 2 that just have blown my socks off. So, All right. Do you want to talk Not-E3 2023?
Yes, let's stop talking about video games and start talking about video games, Jonathan. Let's stop talking about video games we can play and start talking about ones that we can't yet. So Not-E3 2023, like we said at the top of the show, this is not old school style exhaustive list. Some of the stuff I watched around the time they came out, and then afterwards I went through and kind of pulled in anything that grabbed my attention that I thought, oh, this might be something we would want to talk about. So if your favorite game that you wanted us to mention is not on here, my apologies. But I did not want to try to do an exhaustive thing, because there's a lot of stuff that, where when we do the big full E3 things, there's a lot of, like, oh, this was a cool looking indie game, like, that I can't tell anything about from, like, the 2 seconds of it that was in this showcase. We're not going to that level of depth. So I've generally ordered this by when these different showcases happened. Some things I moved around. We're going to start back with the PlayStation showcase from May 23rd, because we never really talked about it. Although I moved a lot of the stuff that was there to later, because one of the problems with the PlayStation showcase is, there wasn't a huge amount there. Like, they didn't show almost any big first-party stuff outside of Spider-Man 2. And most of the third-party stuff ended up having much more in-depth gameplay trailers at Summer Games Fest, which was a couple of weeks later. So I actually moved a lot of those things, like Alan Wake 2, there. So we'll just talk about a couple of things at PlayStation, and then we'll move on to all the stuff that happened in June, like a week or 2 ago. So the big thing at the PlayStation Showcase was the Spider-Man 2 gameplay demo. It's like 10 minutes of Spider-Man 2 that they put right at the end of that show. I'll say this is the only one that I actually saw live, mostly because this was happening the last week I was working that semester, and so I happened to be able to get home a little bit early that day. because we had a bunch of half days while students were taking tests, and I got home right when this was starting. I was like, oh, I'll have a snack and watch this thing on the background. So the PlayStation Showcase wasn't particularly worth watching the whole thing, but I did see it in real time. Did you watch the gameplay demo for Spider-Man 2, Jonathan?
Yes, I did, and it looks fantastic, as we would expect. I think I really love what they're doing with the 2 Spider-Man idea, and I like that because they're bringing in the symbiote, they're making Peter play very differently, and they're making Miles effectively your traditional Spider-Man for this one. I think that's really smart, especially because if they're doing the symbiote thing with Peter, I think you would expect eventually in the narrative Miles will become your kind of de facto hero for a while. And so making him your main Spider-Man is smart. And then eventually, of course, we'll get to, the Venom stuff that they're going to do. I also loved the reveal of Kraven the Hunter, where they had their newfangled high-tech Kraven that you would expect in if they did an MCU version of Kraven, and then real Kraven the Hunter from the original comics comes in and stabs him in the back and is like, let's go hunt some crazy shit. And then the guy's like, where the craziest shit is? New York City. And I'm like, yes, this is the movie I wanted No Way Home to be before they decided to make it a multiverse ripoff. This is great. This looks great.
Yeah, all the Kraven the Hunter stuff is awesome. I fucking love Kraven. He's a great Spider-Man villain, and yeah, it looks like they're going in the right direction. As you say, it's like what they did with a lot of the characters in the original Marvel Spider-Man, where you can see so much of the heritage from the comics, and they're really trying to keep, they're updating them and making it a unique take on the character, but really pulling from the classic stuff, which is really nice. And yeah, I thought the gameplay demo was just incredible. It looks so good. The conceptually, them balancing the 2 characters sounds really fun. They're doing stuff, and they released a little statement afterwards that clarified a couple of things, you have your 2 playable Spider-Men. They showed in the demo a moment where Peter is fighting in Queens, because they've expanded the map out to include some of the other boroughs, like Queens and Brooklyn, I'm pretty sure is in there also, which is cool. And I assume that they probably also made Manhattan. I imagine they probably refreshed some of that and expanded that as well. But Peter is fighting in Queens, and then a button prompt pops up that says press Q or press square or whatever the button was to switch Spider-Man or switch to Miles. And he presses the button, and then kind of very seamlessly, PS5 SSD demo style thing. This is a first party game, so you can use that tech really well. It's Insomniac. It's just you're immediately over on the other side in the middle of Manhattan on the skyscraper as Miles, and then he starts getting into action. And they said that the way they're designing it, and it sounded a little bit kind of like Grand Theft Auto 5, which is the other big game that had this kind of feature of switching protagonists on the fly, that when you're in the open world, generally speaking, you'll be able to switch whenever you want. Obviously, I assume there will be story times probably where that will not necessarily be the case. And that it sounded like there will be certain side content that is Peter content, some side content is Miles content, and maybe some is shared between the 2. And then there will be story missions where it just says, okay, during this part of this story mission, you have to be Peter. During this part of the story mission, you have to be Miles. And there will be some parts during those kinds of missions where they will let you pick or move between which of the 2 characters you want to play as. And that sounds awesome. It sounds like it will be dynamic to a certain extent, where you'll have some amount of authority over which character you want to play, but there will be times where they'll say you got to be this character because this is the character to be in this moment of the story. And that to me sounds like the way to do it. I want to be able to have some freedom over who I play, but I also don't want that freedom to force them to make the story dumb, which I think we've seen this in some games where when you have to support that kind of gameplay feature, all of a sudden you can't write a scene particularly well because you don't know which character is going to be in that cutscene. That never really works out super well. So I'm pretty excited about the opportunities of that multiple protagonist thing with, as you're saying, the different powers that Peter gets to have now. And then also a thing that they didn't really point out, but I think was pretty apparent, is how much faster you are able to move in this game.
Yes.
Some of that stuff where Miles catapults himself over fucking Central Park with this one big move to kind of start that sequence off, and then he starts swinging, and he's going clearly way faster. And they also have, kind of inspired by some of the old school Ditko era Spider-Man stuff, they've got wings that web wings that allow them to glide. That's on the original Spider-Man design. That seems like part of their solution for how do you navigate somewhere like Queens that doesn't have giant skyscrapers everywhere. Some of that gliding stuff, I guess, will fit into the more expanded palette of movement options. But it just seemed like it allowed for this incredible amount of speed that, for people who don't know, the original Spider-Man was limited by how much data they could load on the old PS4 hard drive. Now with the SSD, one of the advantages is your character can physically move faster through the world because you don't have to worry about loading it in and those limitations as much. And it looks like you can, that was something that Miles Morales couldn't accommodate for because that game was designed for both consoles. This is a PS5 exclusive, and you're like seeing that get paid off right away in that demo, and that's very exciting.
Yeah, it did. It was an interesting sort of next-gen look because it didn't necessarily look next-gen in just the basic graphical fidelity, both because this was a streaming thing and also because it is essentially the open world from the last game with some extra stuff on top of it. But I think the move sets and the animations and that kind of stuff, especially the speed, is where you're like, ooh, this feels real nice and fresh. And obviously Insomniac has given us the most impressive tech demo of this generation so far with Ratchet and Clank. So I'm excited for this. This is going to be great. I think we can trust that.
Yes, and they then at Summer Games Fest, they gave a release date for, that's October 20th this year. So we never had it. We knew they were like aiming for this fall. This is the first full release date we get. And Insomniac has been pretty good about this stuff. So I'm going to guess that it probably actually hits that release date. I don't expect this game to be delayed. So some of the other stuff, that was like the really big thing from PlayStation Showcase. Another thing they showed, this got leaked forever ago, so it was not a surprise. But I'm calling it Metal Gear Solid Green Triangle Snake Eater because that is the logo of the game. Is just Metal Gear Solid with a green triangle. It's supposed to be pronounced Metal Gear Solid Delta. I think Green Triangle is a better title for it. It is a full remake of Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater. They showed just like, it was a very cinematic looking cutscene. I don't know if it was supposed to be in game or not. But it was just basically, here's like a swamp because it's, oh, what is this going to be? And then you get ba-dum, ba-dum. You're like, okay, it's Snake Eater. They played the Snake Eater song. And then you see Solid Snake, or I guess Big Boss, not Solid Snake because it's 3, in the jungle. And again, this was leaked forever ago that Konami was doing a full remake of 3. There's not, I think, a lot to say from the teaser other than, sure, I guess, these games. And then I guess the other big part of this, they didn't put this in the notes, but they did also announce they're putting some of those remasters out on modern consoles now. So you will be able to play the classic Metal Gear Solid games because those have been weirdly unavailable forever. I don't know.
They're available on Xbox because of backwards compatibility. Sure. Not the very first one, but the 2, 3, and what's the PSP one?
Peace Walker.
Peace Walker HD. You can play all of those on the Xbox consoles, but not on PlayStation. And then Metal Gear Solid 1 was a PS1 game that was on PS3 but has never been brought forward. So that one has been inaccessible for a while. Honestly, that was more exciting to me. I don't know what Konami sans Kojima remaking Snake Eater looks like, and I don't really care I don't really give a shit. Snake Eater holds up. It's a great game. It's my favorite Metal Gear Solid. I think all of the original Metal Gear Solid games hold up on a gameplay level. They're very fun on that vector. There's other things we can talk about with those games. I'm also very curious. There's some stuff in Snake Eater they are not going to put in a game in 2023. So we'll see. I don't know. I'm actually more excited just to know that the original ones will be out for posterity's sake because there's some good stuff in there. But yeah.
Yeah, and I'm curious, they didn't, because there's going to be 2 collections. One collection is like 1, 2, 3, I think. I think the second collection is some of the side stuff like Peace Walker, and some like the other kind of spin-off games. Again, I didn't put this in my notes, so I don't have all that off the top of my head. But like, there will be at least 2 collections. The thing I'm curious about, do they ever rescue Metal Gear Solid 4 from the clutches of the PS3? Will somebody one day put that, because that is the only place you can play Metal Gear Solid 4. You can play it on a PS3, or you can cloud stream it, I think, to your PS4, PS5 if you want to go that route. But that would be like the thing that most needs to be done. And I don't even want to play that game. I don't really care about Metal Gear Solid that much. It's just crazy to me that game has never come out. It's fucking Metal Gear Solid 4. Someone needs to port that onto something, for the love of God.
I mean, the thing is, You say play that game. I've played that game. There's very little play in that game. It is like 95% cutscenes, so you do get most of the experience just watching a YouTube video. But yes, the 20 minutes of gameplay in that, absolutely should be ported, along with the 75 hours of cutscenes, which is only a slight exaggeration. That game does in fact end with a 90-plus minute cutscene, not a joke.
Yes. I mean, I know that well because that's how I experienced Metal Gear Solid 4 was just watching a Let's Play. And by a Let's Play, I mostly mean watching a movie with like some other people talking over it very occasionally. Because yes, it's weird. It's just crazy to me that has never been ported. I'm sure it's hard to do, but that would make you a lot of money because people fucking really like Metal Gear Solid. I mostly have this here just because I think it's amusing. They have their... there's like really not much detail on exactly what this is, but the PlayStation Project Q, which is a streaming device, I think there's it's unclear to me how much of that is you are streaming from like remote play style from your PS5 versus how much of that is like PlayStation Now you're streaming from their cloud network. Is it both? Is it just the remote play thing? I don't know, but it is a silly looking thing that is like a screen in the middle of a DualSense, basically, is what it's designed like. And this had the feel to me like they didn't really want to talk about this thing yet, but it had been leaked, all like the Metal Gear Solid thing that has been known for fucking ever. It just kind of felt they're like, yeah, sure, fucking, we don't even have a full name for it yet, but sure, here's the thing. It's a thing we're making.
It's so weird because the basic pitch of it on stage here sounded like the Wii U, but for PS5. It's like the gamepad, and you can look at your games on this thing instead of the TV. That exists. You can do that on any of your devices. It's just PlayStation's, game streaming, whatever you call it. And then PS Now streaming, is it going to do that? I don't really know why they're making this or what it is, but it feels like they don't want to talk about it yet, so who cares?
I mean, it's like if you don't want to get a weird thingy that you like stick onto a PS5 controller to stick your phone on there because you want to do like, you can like rig together a solution to do this. If you don't want to do that, you just want to buy a device that just has all that shit in there. Here's a thing for you. Is that a market that really exists? I have fucking no idea. I am not interested in it. The thing that to me, like I thought was, oh, this is actually kind of a smart thing to do. That was something that Adobe, I feel like, talked about, but was part of the same video packages. They are also making PlayStation earpods that are basically look like AirPods, but with PlayStation branding. And I was like, oh yeah, that fucking makes perfect sense. Like, why? I was almost confused. Why have they not done this? Like Sony has all their audio stuff. They have all their headphones. You've got your PS5 branded headphones. Why not have PS5 branded AirPods? It does the shit where it'll like connect directly to the PS5 with proprietary tech, so it will have low latency and it'll do your 3D audio and all that kind of shit. If you don't like headphones and you want to have those, that actually made sense to me. I was like, oh, that's a good idea.
It does make sense. What would make more sense to me is if Sony had some kind of brand integration, because I have Sony wireless headphones. They're noise canceling. I use them on planes. Yeah. They don't work on the PlayStation. Just can't connect them. Why? Sony makes a bunch of the best wireless headphones in the world. They've kind of cornered that market in a lot of ways. They make very good earpods as well. And none of that works natively with the PlayStation, which has Bluetooth. They could connect. I do not get that.
So this thing, like the PlayStation 5 brand of the Pulse headset, or whatever it's called, like they're not connecting via Bluetooth. So it's because Bluetooth audio is there's too much latency for that to work particularly well with games.
You can do it. I've done. You can do it.
You can do it. I don't think it works. Like I wouldn't want to do it. I guess personally.
Sean, the controller is Bluetooth. It's fine. It works.
But that's still a different. That's like a proprietary. That's a proprietary connection that has a lower level of latency. So like they have designed the hardware to connect.
Sony's headphones have the low latency in them. Like you can do this. This is a weird thing that they have not turned on, and it's just bizarre.
So I don't think it's a thing that like you can just do because you do Bluetooth. Like those devices are engineered specifically to communicate in a lower latency fashion.
Their headphones can do that. You can do that on other devices as well. They could do it with their PlayStation. It's just one hand not talking to the other. It's weird.
Yeah, like I think it would be smart if it worked like that. But I don't think it is as simple as that for like what they're doing with how like they're meant to communicate. Because like
audio files sound off.
Yes. No, don't. the audio files are scary. Don't
I'm just saying,
comment.
there are people who probably have the technical knowledge and can tell us.
Yes. But do it in a nice way. That is
what
the scariest part of the internet. Is if you want to research headphones, it's like well, you need to buy like this thing that hooks up through this and gives you this.
Actual audiophiles will tell you to not use wireless at all, and they will tell you to get a wired connection and to use a DAC and all of that stuff. But I just mean people who know. My brother would know this. He does all of this stuff. Anywho, is Bungie bringing back Marathon?
Yes. And in another thing that was leaked forever ago, Bungie is doing a multiplayer shooter version of Marathon. This was a very cinematic trailer. Like, they didn't talk much about the game. It's like an extraction style first-person shooter multiplayer game, which is like feels like is the thing that people are maybe betting on is going to be the new hot shit in first-person multiplayer. Extraction games are like Escape from Tarkov does this, kind of like The Division had a multiplayer mode that was like this, I think. And I know Call of Duty added in a mode that was this kind of thing where it's like a big multiplayer mode where there's a certain amount of persistency about like your gear and stuff between matches. And you go in and you want to try to get whatever kind of gear or loot is in the level and try to extract with it, and then you get to keep it. But if you die, you lose what you had equipped on you. And so there's a certain amount of like permadeath, almost roguelike stuff designed with the multiplayer. That's what that style of genre is. I've never played much of those kinds of games, but that is... They have not said exactly that is like detailed on Marathon, but that has been the pitch, from my understanding, is it is trying to be a game in that kind of genre.
It says on the trailer that you have linked here, it says, this from the account, it says the upcoming PvP extraction shooter Marathon.
Yes.
So,
yeah. So what that means in detail, we will see. But yeah, it is... how that connects to like the old 90s shooters with that Marathon, for people who have never played any of those, is like... basically like a Doom style old school first person shooter, but with like you stop every once in a while and read like 30 minutes of text on a screen from like a terminal with like a crazy AI dude talking to you. And it was like had a lot of story stuff, which is what separated those games. So it feels more like they're kind of using some of the aesthetic of the Marathon games in the name. My guess is that this is not going to have, like, if you're curious about what happened next in the epic Marathon saga, I don't know if this is going to satisfy those questions for people, though.
My only experience with Marathon is the season of Red vs. Blue, where they shot the stuff in the past in the old Marathon engine, which was very funny, but I know nothing about it. It seems like they're just making a new game and using it because they have the IP laying around. I don't know what the Marathon IP gets you in 2023, but sure. I want to play something new from Bungie.
Yes, me too. I can't play Destiny anymore because Destiny is weird. So playing a different game would be fun. And it's a rad fucking trailer, I will say. I think of all the very cinematic style trailers from Not-E3 2023, this is probably my favorite because it's just fucking cool. It doesn't tell you anything about the game, but it's very cool. Next up, this game amused me when I saw the trailer, and then apparently all the stuff I've heard from people who got to play it at Summer Games Fest is that this is actually apparently really fucking good, is the game Foam Stars. Did you watch this trailer, Jonathan?
I've been looking at it while you were talking because in your notes you just wrote down Square Enix Splatoon, and I'm like, what is that? And I brought it up, and it is. It looks like the trailer should say, please don't watch Nintendo lawyers, because it really is. Just watching the video, it is very much like Split. And if for those who don't know, Splatoon, especially in Japan, is enormous. Yes. It's a massive, massive hit. So it makes all the sense in the world that another Japanese developer like Square would want in on this, which is to say a big, kind of arena shooter where the goal isn't to kill the enemy, but to do stuff to the level with all these fun, colorful things. And it looks very cool. It just looks like Splatoon. But it sounds like from what you heard that it's actually fun to play too.
Yeah, I heard from multiple, I read some stuff in some of the podcasts I listened to, like the Jeff Gerstmann podcast. It sounded like they really liked it. The big thing that separates it from Splatoon is that it's foam, not paint. And so it piles up, and so it is dynamically changing the battlefield while the game is happening. And that's as funny as it is that they're just here's 90% of this is just exactly Splatoon, and then here's like the 10% that's different. But like, there's a lot of that's how like video games are made, right? So many games are.
Oh, yeah.
Here's like, Dark Souls changes everything. Now everyone's like, well, now we got to put our attack buttons on R1 and R2, right? And so is it very shameless? Absolutely. It is like one of the most shameless video game trailers you have seen in years. But there are no other games that are like Splatoon. It's such a unique concept that it's cool to see someone like taking inspiration from it, and the twist of like, this is something that is like changing the actual shape and configuration of the level as people are like foaming over it or whatever. Like, that's a cool idea. So
it is. No, I'm watching the trailer and it looks great. It's on this the level they're showing off is this big casino level where you're on like a big roulette table and there's chips and everything. It looks cool. It's also a different level of graphical fidelity than what Nintendo could do with, like, I think it looks like there's a different, I mean, just the geometry of this foam is changing the level. That looks cool, and it seems like the pitch is also, this is like a version of Splatoon you probably couldn't do on Switch hardware. So I'm looking forward to that. That seems fun.
Yeah. So very cool. So that was all. Again, there was other stuff at the Sony show, but I kind of kicked a lot of it to Summer Games Fest. So let's move into that. So the next, way later on June 9th, we had our Summer Games Fest, the Jeff Keighley ran thing. There really was not, for something that seems to have been very long, there really was not that much there that like I had to pull out, but there's a few things here. The big thing that they ended with, again, this is just kind of in a random order how I threw together these links. They had their big trailer at the end for Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. This is basically part 2 of the Final Fantasy VII Remake project that's coming out early 2024. The trailer basically does the thing that the Final Fantasy VII Remake trailers do, where or at least the first Rebirth trailer did, where I saw so many people online after the trailer came out be like, oh my god, what is the implication of this? Like, what does this mean about how they're changing, blah, blah, blah. And then I was like, looked at the trailers, all of that is stuff that's from this part of Final Fantasy VII. Like, there's nothing in there that's not from Final Fantasy VII. There's none of, like it's cut together to make it seem weird and crazy, but that's because the story of Final Fantasy VII is kind of weird and crazy. All of it is stuff that if you know the midsection of Final Fantasy VII, it is teasing a lot of stuff that happens in that section of the game, along with in terms of stuff that's different from the remake. Obviously, you have new playable characters, like being able to play as Red 13, and Yuffie's in there. I know that they did that DLC I haven't played, but she's in there and you see her. And then obviously the big change that it seems based on that trailer is you've got a much bigger open area to explore. What the extent of that is, I'm curious, because Final Fantasy VII Remake was such a, you were running down corridor after corridor to different hubs kind of game, and they didn't give you like a big picture perspective on how the game is designed. It's just visually implied that's much more expansive, but I'm curious to see what that will be like in practice. But if you liked Final Fantasy VII Remake, they are doing the next part of that game.
I'm gonna be honest. I felt nothing watching this, and I felt sad. I felt nothing. It just, and I don't know what it is. I love the original Final Fantasy VII. I really love Crisis Core, and that remaster they did recently was brilliant. And after I played Crisis Core, I did put Final Fantasy VII on my PS5 again, and I played the first couple hours, hoping that maybe Crisis Core would allow me to give this game like a second look and kind of like it more. And I still don't really love the approach. I think it's like on a production level immaculate, but the combat just doesn't work for me. Especially after playing Crisis Core, which to me feels like the good version of the Final Fantasy VII Remake combat, and the Final Fantasy VII Remake combat feels like a much more awkward, unwieldy version of what Crisis Core did. So, I don't know. And then I saw this and like, yeah, it's a lot of nice looking stuff from 7. Honestly, the prospect of an open world version of this game made me die a little inside, because it makes sense, because this part of the original Final Fantasy VII is your classic JRPG thing where you're on a big world map and can go explore. But now I'm thinking of like, how much filler and shitty side quests can they fill in this one? If they could do it on a game that was all corridors like Final Fantasy VII Remake in Rebirth, ooh, there's going to be dimensions of filler the mankind has never known. I don't know. Maybe it'll surprise me. I will probably almost certainly play it, but this trailer did nothing for me.
Yeah, I'm in a similar space to you. I think maybe I'm a little bit more excited than you. Like there's an ember burning in my heart for Final Fantasy VII. That when you see some of the shit from my favorite stuff in that game, which is a lot of like the Nibelheim flashback stuff that you see glimpses of in the trailer. Like it's like, okay, yeah, I really fucking like Final Fantasy VII now. But yeah, I think we are like kind of some of the odd men out because I know this trailer went fucking huge and everyone went crazy for it. Again, in a way that made no sense to me. If I don't understand people trying to dissect the trailer for like, what's the crazy shit that they're going to do? And that's the thing I roll my eyes at the most because me putting my chips down here, I talked about this last time we talked about Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Like, I am betting that this game is going to be structured exactly the way that Remake was, where it's going to be almost entirely just a very step-by-step, very faithful remake of the events of that section of Final Fantasy VII, just with a lot of extra shit thrown in there that really gums up the pacing. And then they're going to occasionally do a thing that is kind of weird that makes no sense until you get to the end of the game where they have like 2 hours that make no sense and are dumb with Sephiroth bullshit that adds nothing to the actual story of Final Fantasy VII. And then be like, and you have to get the payoff to this in the third Final Fantasy VII Remake game. But if you're going into this thinking it's going to blow up your understanding of the story of Final Fantasy VII or do something wildly different than that game, it's not. Because all the shit in this trailer is just the story of Final Fantasy VII. And you cannot do the story of Final Fantasy VII if at the same time you are blowing everything up about that game. And it just like immediately, I think looking at this trailer makes me feel how cheap and worthless all that shit was at the end of Remake Part 1, which was just nonsense. All that Sephiroth stuff was nonsense. And whether Zax is alive, maybe, but in a different dimension or something, because he can't be alive, because you can't have the story of Final Fantasy. You can't remake the rest of Final Fantasy VII, but Zax is there. That changes everything. So it's like, obviously all that stuff is bullshit. And that just kind of makes me exhausted. I would rather have these things be a fairly straightforward remake of that game that was a lot leaner than what Remake 1 did. And I wouldn't have done Remake 1 as just the Midgar stuff anyways, because that didn't support the plot of a full game, because you didn't get to the actual plot of Final Fantasy VII yet. This game is going to open with the scene of Cloud and the gang in the inn going over the flashback to Nibelheim, the first one. It's like, that's a weird spot to start a game, because that's like the beginning of the plot of the bigger saga of Final Fantasy VII. And it's weird that we're only going to get that at the opening of this sequel. So yeah, like there's some stuff of where the Elena character pops up. She's one of the Turks. I was like, cool. Like, I like seeing a really high fidelity version of that character and have her voice actor do stuff. Like, that's the stuff I liked in the remake. But then a lot of the rest of it, I just kind of feel exhausted by looking at. And then I feel bad because then everybody's excited about this trailer and I feel like a cranky old man. Which is weird because I only played Final Fantasy VII the first time a few years ago. All these people grew up with it, losing their minds, and I'm like, this is the Final Fantasy VII I'm looking for.
Yeah, I don't know. It's weird. We'll see. There's some fundamental gap of understanding with people who went gaga for the first one that I will never understand, because they went gaga over a 40-hour remake of a 3-hour section of game. That to me, fundamentally, it would be like if people just were absolutely crazy about the first Hobbit movie to a level like that. I cannot, like, man, they spent 2 hours before we got to chapter 3. That was so cool. And I'm like, was it? Was it? I don't know. Yeah,
we're in the same place on that stuff. I'll play it, but we'll see how good it is. This is also where we got something that had been teased forever, which is the new Mortal Kombat game. It's been a while. It's been like 3 years, I think, since Mortal Kombat 11 came out. And usually that studio puts out a game every year. They'd gone on a cycle of swapping between Mortal Kombat and Injustice. But this is Mortal Kombat 1. We're doing the thing because it's like a pseudo reboot. For people who don't know, the story of Mortal Kombat 11, which is a game I watched a Let's Play of, so I know the plot, ended with the universe being rebooted basically by Liu Kang, who is the Bruce Lee character. Every fighting game has a Bruce Lee character. He's the Bruce Lee character of Mortal Kombat. So he reboots the universe and becomes the fire god Liu Kang. And so they're doing a Mortal Kombat 1 thing where it'll be the story of Mortal Kombat 1, but new with different versions of the characters in this like new timeline version of the universe. It looked like Mortal Kombat 11. I'm not a Mortal Kombat guy. I like admiring the story and the dumb shit about Mortal Kombat from a distance. I have never liked playing those games. I've tried playing Mortal Kombat. I've tried playing Injustice. I just don't like that style of fighting game. But if you do, this does look good. And it seems to address some of the issues I know people had with 11, where people felt that game was like really slow in terms of the movement speed and like the combos and stuff. And this had like a lot of air juggles and stuff that I know a lot of Mortal Kombat fans are excited for. But it was one of the biggest trailers at the show, but since I'm not an MK guy, I can't speak too much to it.
I can't either. I will just say, though, I'm looking at the trailer right now. It is gorgeous.
Yes.
The graphical fidelity here and like the backgrounds and the animations, and it's all smooth 60. Boy, it's another one that just looks very next gen. Like, oh, okay, we're finally in the new generation. This is an actual PS5 game. This isn't cross generation, I don't think. And it looks real pretty, and then also very violent because people's bones are breaking everywhere.
Yes, it does. I think one of the things for Mortal Kombat is at a certain point, I do think they need to pull back on the like, and in the middle of the fight, you like stab an icicle through the man's heart and gouge his eyes out and rip his throat out, and then that did 30% of life damage, and then you have to keep fighting. It's I don't know, like I think like Mortal Kombat has gone over a hill at a certain point for me, where like the fatalities and stuff are no longer fun, and it's just like it's too gross or it's like too realistic and too dumb that like you can't ask me to care about these characters and then also watch them like rip off the head of their best friend, right? Like imagine if Street Fighter did this and you have Ryu and Ken having a sparring match, and then the end of that match ended with Ryu ripping Ken's arms off, reaching into the sockets and grabbing his spine, ripping the spine in half, and then ripping Ken in half in two, throwing them up in the air and blowing up both of them with a Hadouken, which is basically what happens with these. And then like his deformed skull with the tongue hanging out lands in there, and like an eye lands in Ryu's fist and he fucking crushes it, right? That's the level of ridiculous violence. And then it's like, hey, but you want to play another round? It's just so far, and you can't. One of the things I think that keeps you from getting into Mortal Kombat is I just can't at a certain point invest in the characters when that's the thing you're doing at the end of the fight with like your wife or whatever. With some of the relationships with the characters is wild. Like you can do that to a character that's like this character's daughter, and you like slit their throat and all this shit.
I'm looking at a fatality here. It's about 3 minutes and 20 seconds into the video where a woman throws like a kunai on a chain through a dude's neck, and we see the x-ray of it breaking the vertebrae and just shattering the spinal cord going through, and then like the head is coming off and all in slow motion and blood everywhere. For one, we know this is giving the developers PTSD. Yeah. This is something that's been reported because you don't just do that off the top of your head. You have to study dead bodies, and it's disgusting. And yeah, I feel like I've heard this too every time there's a new Mortal Kombat. It seems like there's a growing contingent being like, okay, maybe the violence is a little too much, and maybe like less is more. Because no fatality in Mortal Kombat is as brutal as the level 2 super fucking Cammy has in Street Fighter 6, where she gets on your shoulders and spins you around and comes down and kicks your knees out and cracks your back. Like that shit is like gnarly and really effective and rad, but it's also not I'm murdering this person and ripping them into pieces and seeing all like the grisly detail of like the insides of a human body as it is like being ripped to pieces. It's not cartoony. It's just it's too much exploitative. And yeah, I'm looking at like there's a whole reel of fatalities at the end of this one here, and it's just gross. I love fantasy violence as much as the next guy, but there's actual fun cartoon versions of this, and then there's what they're doing here, which feels like some kind of snuff film. Yeah, it definitely is. This has been true, I think, of the past couple of games. Probably around 10 or 9 is where I think for me, just looking from the outside in, has kept me from wanting to get too into this franchise. The one that cracked me up the most is I think it's around the middle of the trailer. There's a part where Raiden, who used to be the God of Thunder in this new timeline, he's just a dude who still has lightning powers. I'm curious why in this new timeline he still has lightning powers if he's not the God of Thunder anymore. But he's like training in some like mystical monk camp or whatever. And the guy, I don't know if this is like a character because he didn't look familiar to me, but there's a guy there who's like
oh, you need to train. He's like giving him a speech about how you need to train better and be more dedicated or whatever. And then it intercuts and he says like, and then Raiden says something very dramatic back to him. And then it cuts to a fight. And it's like these two characters, like this is his like a master pupil relationship. And then Raiden throws the guy up into the sky and fucking blows his entire middle section out with a lightning bolt. And you see his like innards fly out as he gets ripped to pieces by this lightning bolt. It's like, that guy was just giving you like a simple lecture as you were practicing kung fu, dude. Like, you're going way too far. You didn't need to fucking murder him and his whole family or whatever to get back for like this brief talking to you were given. It's very silly. I wish Mortal Kombat pulled it back because I want to like those games, but I've always been put off by them. Anyways,
well, let's talk about a game that looks like it's going to be just as violent.
Yes, exactly. Sonic Superstars, the Sonic game, finally, where if you want to murder Eggman and cut him to pieces with your hedgehog quills, this is not this game. This is a game. It is not developed by the Sonic Mania people, but there was some support by the Sonic Mania team that became apparent on Twitter afterwards. Christian Whitehead, who's one of the main guys from Sonic Mania, talked about how they used the same physics engine that Sonic Mania used as the basis for this game. But basically, Sonic Superstars is a 2D Sonic game. There's a lot of the studio that's making it. I forget the name off the top of my head. I should have probably written in the notes. But the studio that is making it is a bunch of old school Sega devs who left Sega forever ago, like that. Some of whom were involved in the original Sonic games. And it's 2D Sonic, but with 3D models, kind of like the 2D levels of like a Sonic Generations and stuff like that.
It's new Super Mario Bros. For Sonic is the kind of pitch, if you want to look at the visuals of it, yeah. Yeah,
and then the big thing is that it also has the multiple characters. It's got Sonic, Knuckles, Tails, and Amy, and it is like classic Sonic CD era Amy, who's getting kind of like a renaissance. I know they added her into Sonic Origins Plus or whatever with the old Sonic games, and they kind of ROM hacked her in there, which is cool. And then they all have different abilities, as you would expect of the different Sonic characters. But the big thing is that there's like a co-op thing, kind of also like New Super Mario Brothers. I know that was a big thing in those games. And, you know, I don't know if this is like the Sonic game I personally need, but the fact that it does look like it runs well in the sense of like the running, like the momentum. It does not look like a Sonic 4 scenario where they fucked up the fundamental gameplay. It's hard to tell without touching it. But when Christian Whitehead said, yeah, it's the same physics as Sonic Mania, like it's that same momentum and all that stuff. And I think you can tell by watching the trailer. Like I wish it was really gorgeous looking pixel art. I know that that's like a lot harder and much more time consuming to do. So I understand it is much more, it's a much simpler pipeline to do, particularly if you have a bunch of characters like that. Who all have to interact with each other to do 3D models. I like the pixel stuff better from Sonic Mania, but it is cool that they're doing a Sonic game, and it looks like they're doing it the right way.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited for this one. I think at first when I just saw some clips online, I was like, I had a little bit of a Sonic the Hedgehog 4 Part 1 and 2 flashback, which was their first attempt to do New Super Mario Bros. With Sonic. This looks much better than that, though, when you actually sit down and like look at the trailer in depth. Like, it's pretty gorgeous, even if it's not the pixel art. It's nice looking 3D. You know, I think this is more up my alley than probably even Sonic Frontiers was. I do think it's weird that Sega continues to have their... If we hit on something good with Sonic, we absolutely under no circumstances can ever do it again. That is like their rule. There will never be a Sonic Mania 2. I'm guessing there will never be a Sonic Frontiers 2. There will probably be another version of Werehog Sonic before we get that. Just like if it works, we're done and we're never touching it again. And there you go. So this will be the one Sonic made in this style. I hope it's good.
Yes, it is the Sonic curse. I don't know why they do it, but yes. Next
they
up
love
is
variety.
Yes,
they just love it.
They very much do. You know, think about variety. A lot of times it doesn't work out, but every once in a while it does, and it's kind of nice. Next up, we've got Alan Wake 2. Alan Wake 2 originally had a cinematic trailer at the Sony thing, and then it showed up at Summer Games Fest with like a gameplay trailer, and I think there was like a behind-the-scenes demo that people could play. This game looks fucking awesome. It's coming out October 17th. I don't think they had announced the date beforehand. We also know they said that it's a digital-only game. which is interesting. Like, kind of disappointing. Obviously, it would be nice if people could get it physically, but they kind of said, hey, it like reduces our costs here. The game is going to be cheaper because of it, and it's the kind of thing where, hey, there's going to be a huge patch on day one. Like, we're not going to pretend that that's not the case here. So there's something kind of honest about yeah, fuck it. Like, it's just a digital only game. Obviously, like, Remedy's stuff doesn't move such huge numbers that I imagine it probably honestly does not going to affect them too much with the kind of more niche audience that they appeal to. But in terms of the trailers itself, I think it fucking looks awesome. It looks like there's a little bit of a Last of Us 2 kind of influence in the gameplay to me, just in terms of how the characters move a little bit. Has a kind of Last of Us-y vibe. It's definitely, you know, more subdued than like Control, where you had all these like psychic powers. Here it looks like, as somebody who's not played Alan Wake, it looks like it's following broadly the thing that Alan Wake 1 did, which is you have like a flashlight that you're using to sort of depower these like shadow monsters that then like makes them vulnerable to your more traditional third-person combat stuff. But the big thing about the trailer is just the vibes are awesome. The story seems cool. It just seems like if you want that kind of Twin Peaksy weird Remedy game tone that Control definitely had, it has that up the wazoo. And it's also got a cop who is voiced by the guy, I think his name is James McCaffrey. I don't remember his name. But it's the guy who's the voice of Max Payne from the old Max Payne games. And I don't think the character is literally supposed to be Max Payne, but he does look exactly like Max Payne, and he's got the voice of Max Payne. And it's very cool. Seems like there's two sides of the story. I think they're doing a co-protagonist thing where there's this like young female detective who's with the not Max Payne guy who she's investigating the disappearance of Alan Wake. And then Alan Wake himself is in some sort of crazy, you know, space like the Red Room from Twin Peaks. It's that kind of thing. They've said that you play as both of the characters. So I'm very excited about this game. I loved Control. They put out the Alan Wake Remastered, which I need to find some time to play here before this comes out, because I definitely, you know, this is coming out 3 days before Spider-Man 2, so I'm not going to play it at launch, but I would like to try to play it before the end of the year, because the game looks fucking awesome.
Why are game publishers so goddamn bad at this? Spread out your fucking releases. Can you imagine if the way movies did it was just, hey, Fast and Furious 10 and Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse and Mission Impossible 7 and all of these, they're coming out the exact same day and they'll be in theaters for 2 weeks and then we're done. I don't get it. That's the video game release strategy, and it's very weird to me.
Yeah, and it's very like that. This interval between October 17th and October 20th, it's literally 3 days of, it's giving you flashbacks to Titanfall 2, which came out sandwiched between like Call of Duty and Battlefield or wherever. You're like, what the fuck are you guys doing? Like, you maniacs. And yeah, it's weird. You know, I wish that was spaced out differently, but you know, I'll play Alan Wake 2 when I can get to it. Next up is another game I'm tremendously excited for. This is Like a Dragon Gaiden, the man who erased his name. This was announced with a trailer a while ago, but this is the Like a Dragon or Yakuza or Yuga Gotoku, pick your name, spin-off that is starring Kiryu, that is set after the events of Yakuza 6, that is leading into some of the 7 and 8 stuff. He was obviously kind of a minor character behind the scenes in Yakuza 7. He's going to be a co-protagonist in 8 along with Ichiban. And it's going to be classic style brawler combat. So they showed off the combat in a big gameplay trailer. There was also a RGG summit with the developer that they did later that I watched because I like these games where they talked about this and they talked about Yakuza 8, so I have some stuff from that I can talk about as well. Basically, they broke down that the combat in this is going to have 2 different styles. One is the Yakuza style, which is basically like your classic brawler stuff. It's not literally the exact same moveset that Kiryu has had. If you watch the trailer, you can tell that he's doing some different stuff. But it's generally the kind of traditional Yakuza combat. But then most exciting is he has a new style that they're calling the agent style. That is, they said, is inspired by spy movies, because Kiryu is wearing like a special services style, like bodyguard suit and that kind of stuff. And he's got all these kinds of wacky gadgets, like a grappling hook that he can use to grab enemies and objects from a distance and like spin them around and throw them. He has drones that he summons at one point that start fighting for him. And then that trailer ended with him lighting a cigarette, throwing the cigarette behind him where there's a bunch of goons, and it blowing up as he walked away in slow motion, and it was very cool. And I am way into the madness of what they showed of this fucking crazy agent style thing. And I am 110% here for Kiryu getting back up to his old school Yakuza antics in this little side game thing. It seems fucking rad.
Absolutely. Do you want to tell the kids what Yakuza 8 is shaping up to be as well?
Yes, yeah, we might as well talk about that here, because I think I put that in the Xbox section, but we might as well talk about that here. Yeah, so Yakuza 8, or Like a Dragon, Infinite Wealth, as its title is in English. It is Ryuga Gotoku 8 without a subtitle in Japanese, so the titles are just getting even crazier somehow, even though they're trying to make them simpler by putting it back to what the Japanese titles are, but now it's like even harder to keep track of. They showed a teaser trailer for that was just a cinematic from the game where it is Ichiban from 7 washes up on a beach in presumably Hawaii. They didn't confirm if it is exactly Hawaii, but it must be Hawaii. If you just think about Japan's relationship and what you're seeing there. He wakes up and it's a classic gag of he's naked and the camera is covering his junk with different objects. It's just, everyone loves it. Austin Powers did it. There's a KyoAni thing that we're not going to watch, but Full Metal Panic Fumofu has a whole episode that does this. It's just a good old gag. And he's waking up on the beach and everyone's like freaking out. There's all the English voice actors in it are amazing because they're actual native English people. And there's like a surfer dude that goes like, "Oh, what's up? Surf's up, bro." Like looking at Ichiban who's buck fucking naked, and it's great. And Ichiban has no idea what's going on. And he just goes, "What the fuck is happening?" And then it says Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth or Yakuza 8. And it is a great, weird little trailer. And there's not much to discern from that trailer, but at the RGG Summit, they did talk a bit more about it. One thing that was interesting to me, apparently Yakuza 8 was actually in pre-production before they started making the Gaiden game with Kiryu, and it was in the process of writing the story for 8 that they realized, it would probably be cool if we did something that kind of built that bridge between 7 and 8 with some of the Kiryu stuff. And so even though Gaiden is coming out first, because it's a smaller scoped game, it started production after 8. But 8 will have Kiryu and Ichiban as co-protagonists. There was a brief cutscene that they showed that was just Kiryu and Ichiban talking to each other, and they're just kind of shooting the shit. And it was just like a little tiny scene that they showed just to give people kind of a taste. And their relationship seems really cool. It's very much like Kiryu is the like older brother who's sort of a bit world weary and has seen everything. And then Ichiban is this very like puppy dog optimistic, the younger brother who wants to like learn everything from this cool old dude. And it's a really great kind of vibe the game gives you. And they did confirm that Hawaii area is going to be like an explorable area. It's not just like a story thing. It's going to be one of the places you go to. Yokohama will be in the game. Yokohama will also be in the Gaiden game, which makes sense because Kiryu obviously has been there before when you play 7. And so one of the new locations, or maybe they didn't say if there was going to be more new locations, but at least a new location in 8 is going to be Hawaii. And that is so exciting. That is like the most exciting thing I've heard about this game so far, even more than the co-protagonist thing, is the idea of Hawaii as a setting and like all the goofy side stories and the mini games and shit that you can get up to. That is, the prospects of that, I think, is delightful is understating it.
I hope there's a mini game where you have to control different elements of the beach to keep keep Ichiban from being naked. So he is naked and he has to move, and you have to like move all the things on screen to keep his penis from showing up. That would be a fun Yakuza minigame.
Oh my god, that would be fucking amazing. Or just you could also do the Metal Gear Solid 2 thing, where he just has to cover his junk while you're running around, and you have to like hide behind boxes or something to try to get clothes on before people catch you. One of the things the director of the game said in reference to this trailer, which they showed again at that summit, was reminding you that like this is similar to something that happens early in Yakuza 7 where he gets like knocked out and then washed up in Yokohama. That's how he ends up there. And they're like kind of just like, this is just something that happens to him sometimes. Like it's meant to like reference that from the last game. And I hope that that's just a thing now that happens to him in every game he's in, is it's always, he gets like knocked out or something wacky happens and he ends up without any clothes on and just dumped out in some some new strange location. And that's something that just always happens to Ichiban. It's inevitable.
Yep. This next one is one I'm excited for, Sean. This is a video game adaptation of Akira Toriyama's Sandland. That is a manga Toriyama did in 2000. It's a single volume manga. I think it's out of print here in the States, but it's on the Shonen Jump app has it. I read it way back in the day, and I would need to go back to it. They are also making a movie in Japan. It's a CGI movie that is coming out in August, which I just learned Yugo Kanno is doing the music. He's the guy who did G-Reco. Anyway, the movie looks good as well. I think there's something about Toriyama's art style that fits this kind of 3D aesthetic really well. But the game looks cool. It's being developed by Ilka. It's a big, kind of RPG with a bunch of different game elements, it looks like. I like the look of it a lot.
Yeah, it's a cool trailer. It's confusing that it did feel like it came out of nowhere, but it is cool that they're making a whole game on it too. It's just like I like the modern Dragon Quest stuff is like this as well. They're just very good at capturing Toriyama's art with modern 3D graphics, and like a lot of
no artist has ever been integrated into video games more when you think about Toriyama's history. So it always works. Yeah, there's something about his art style. Why Sandland is getting picked up again 23 years later is kind of weird. I don't know, but I'm glad that it is getting the love, because basically since Dragon Ball started getting adapted, none of Toriyama's other stuff has gotten much attention other than Dr. Slump occasionally. But yeah, this is cool.
Yeah, and this just opens the door for the big, epic AAA 100-hour open-world RPG of Dr. Slump. We just RLA running around getting into hijinks. That's the next thing that needs to happen.
Made by the Ryuga Gotoku studio. And it is
Yes.
Arale in the city. It's Penguin Village is your city this time. There's lots of mini games.
No, I thought you were going to say Arale ends up in Kamurocho and gets wrapped up in the internal politics of the Tojo clan.
That would also be good. I would love to see Arale interacting with the Yakuza. That'd be great.
It's like they make her, like, she messes up or whatever, and they make her cut off her pinky, and she's like, okay, and she cuts her pinky off, and like, oh, that's weird, and then she just sticks it back on and goes, ha-ha. It'd be great.
We've stumbled on too good an idea here, Sean.
Yeah.
All right, moving on.
All right, so moving on. So that was all I had from the Summer Games Fest. Next, the biggest show was the Xbox Showcase, which if you wanted, you could have gone and seen in a movie theater. They did have a lot of stuff here. Nothing big that was new in terms of first party, but there were some updates on some first party games, and there's just like a lot of third party stuff, including some Persona stuff. So that ended up being the largest section of my notes here, including a fun game I'll have for Jonathan. Make sure you don't highlight any of those things that are blacked out, because I have an important question I need to ask you later that I don't want you to know the answer to. So we'll get to that in a second. First up with this Xbox Showcase, they started with a trailer for Fable, which is a game that feels like has been in development for 5,000 years. It's a game we've known about for longer than it's been announced, because it had been leaked forever that Playground Games was making a new Fable. And then they showed it off, I want to say, like the announcement event for the series consoles, which was like 4 years ago at this point. So Fable's been around for a long time in development. Of course, this is like an old school Xbox franchise that I really liked. Fable 1 and 2. Fable 3 was bad, but Fable 1 and 2 were great games back in the day. Of course, Lionhead Studios, the studio that made Fable, was shut down by Xbox in the end of the 360 generation, so it's been a long time. It's an okay little teaser trailer. It's there's not much to glean from it in terms of gameplay. It's all just kind of flavor stuff of, here's like the humor of Fable. It's very British. Richard Ayoade, the British comedian, is in it. It's very nice looking, and from what I understand, it is meant all to be like in-engine stuff. So like the character models look really good. The Richard Ayoade face scan is really good. But it is hard for me to get like excited because there's very little info. And it's like Fable is such a weird franchise. Like Fable 1 and 2 are very strange games, and there are no games that are quite like them. There's almost stuff that's almost Sims like about Fable, with like your relationships with NPCs and like the weird interactions you can have. You can get like married and have kids in the Fable games. Like they're weird games. And you just don't get anything from here that indicates what are they going to be doing with those gameplay ideas? Because the only thing you really get from the trailer is they're trying to keep the kind of corny British humor stuff in the game, which is like, that's nice. But I'm just curious about what is that game actually going to be. And with that game having been in development for so long, it's kind of disappointing that I still feel like I don't know anything more about this game than I did with the last teaser trailer they showed like 4 years ago.
That's the Xbox experience, Sean. That's how they all are. And eventually, maybe usually they get canceled. Sometimes they come out and then they don't mean anything. This did nothing for me. I think it's weird that they're banking part of their comeback on Fable, which is a game that was last talked about in 2008 with Fable 2. Whatever. I don't really care.
Yeah, I wish I want that game to come out so I just have an excuse to play Fable 1 and 2 again. Like that's what I want to see. It's like I just want an excuse to play them that justifies the time to me. Next up we have Avowed. This is the Obsidian RPG that was also, I feel like we've known about forever because this was also like an early Xbox Series game announcement. But it was announced with just kind of a teaser trailer that basically was Obsidian is making a fantasy style RPG. I'll say, like, I was pretty curious about it. I've liked some of Obsidian's games. I like that kind of game, but there's something about this trailer for Avowed that just made it very clear. Oh, this is just the Outer Worlds, but with fantasy stuff instead of space stuff. And I really did not particularly like the Outer Worlds all that much. And, you know, if maybe the like main story writing and stuff is more interesting and more memorable, maybe Avowed will be worth it. But it definitely, like, I don't know. There's something about that trailer that I was like, okay, I feel like I knew exactly the game. Like, I felt like I had played the game because I played the Outer Worlds, and it's like mentally just replace the guns with the swords and the space powers with the magic powers, and that is exactly the thing. And it feels like that's kind of the story is going to be broadly similar in style. And I don't know. I left that gameplay trailer being pretty underwhelmed with Avowed. The game did not seem to be ambitious in the way I think I was hoping, and I think other people were as well, that there was a prospect of Obsidian having much more backing from a bigger company like Microsoft, that maybe they could push things a little bit further, whether that's like the depth of the game or the like the size of the game or whatever, or just do something different with that extra kind of oomph behind them. And this just felt like they would have made this game whether Microsoft had bought them or not, because it is just exactly the same kind of game that Outer Worlds was.
I will say, it looks nice. I do think graphically it looks like a pretty big step up from their past work. It is very nice looking. There's a lot of effects going on. The lighting is really cool. I have no major opinion because I have not played any of Obsidian's recent games, but yeah. I mean, it does look very basic. It looks like every other fantasy trailer shown at an Xbox show over the last 5 years of games that mostly don't ever come out, but yeah.
Yeah, it was kind of a nothing trailer for me. They announced they're doing a 1 terabyte Xbox Series S. That is a black Xbox Series S. That was going to come out in November. So that's
for an extra $50, which given the SSDs have gotten much, much cheaper. Really what this should just be is the Series S is being refreshed with a terabyte standard, because 512 is not nearly enough given how also like the Xbox firmware is huge. Really, like that 512 is like 300 maybe. I don't know. This is kind of stupid on the same level as Nintendo upping the price on the Switch OLED, but at least an OLED screen is nice and does actually cost more. Like, you are getting something better. This just is like, okay, well, a terabyte of SSD has come down to the cost of 512 of NVMe storage, so we should just put it in there. Instead, they're putting it in there for $50 extra, which is dumb.
Yeah, I mean, I recently got a 2 terabyte SSD on sale for my PS5, and that was like $80. And because I wanted to finally expand my PS5 memory. And this is where that proprietary memory card for Xbox, I know it's like cheaper than it was at launch, but it's still like inappropriately expensive because it's a proprietary. You can't just buy whatever you want. And yeah, this definitely is like a little bit weird and curious. It just feels like, you know, and Microsoft has run into issues with manufacturing as like enough Series X's, and it's like the Series S is like the only thing that can get out at appropriate numbers, and that's one of the reasons why it feels like this is happening, is like, well, shit, you know, it's still way cheaper because the chips are way smaller for the Series S. You can manufacture a lot more of them. They're less likely to fail on the production line. So let's like just bolster that, kind of is what that feels like. Next up, we had a trailer for Forza Motorsport, which is coming out October 10th. That is just called Forza Motorsport, which is frustrating.
It's so weird. I don't get it.
Yeah, the trailer, it's a trailer for a car game. Like, I don't know. I don't know how much to talk about it. It looks very nice. It's a very pretty car game.
I guess the logic is the Horizon games are so popular, and the Forza Motorsport games, which are more racer sim games, had kind of fallen off because people liked the Horizon fun style. And maybe if they reboot it and don't put a number, people will be more interested. I guess that's the idea. I don't know. Again, the only franchise Xbox can get out reliably continues to be the car ones, which is funny to me.
Yes.
Let's talk about the good stuff, Sean.
Yes. So next up, this is a game that had not been, as far as I know, its appearance here had not been leaked at all. And I have been wondering about this game since I think 2016 when it was originally announced. This is what was formerly Project Refantasy from the old Persona team, now called Studio Zero. This is Metaphor Refantazio, which I don't know how you're supposed to pronounce that, but that's how I'm going for it. So this is the Persona team, right? It's Katsuya Hashino is the director, Soejima is the character artist, and the Meguro is the composer, and it's like all the people below that as well. That team, after making Persona 5, they sort of disbanded as the Persona team, reformed to the Studio Zero, announced that they were making a fantasy game called Project Refantasy, and showed a teaser trailer that was just basically some art, and that was in 2016. So it's been a long time, but they finally have shown it, and they're saying it's going to come out next year. It looks fucking wild. It is a big crazy trailer that is basically a gameplay trailer. It's like all in-engine stuff. It's all showing like images of some of the battle stuff. You're seeing some of the menus and things like that. And it looks very much like Persona-esque in terms of, you can tell it's turn-based. You can tell that it's got some of the menus look like it has things like maybe an equivalent for social links potentially, and all of that. Like if you can tell it's made by those people, it's going to have some of those gameplay ideas, but also obviously the setting is wildly different. Like I don't even know how to describe the setting based on the trailer. Like calling it
steampunk fantasy, but like that doesn't. It's too complicated and stylish. Yeah,
because it's like it's not straightforwardly fantasy, nor is it straightforwardly steampunk. It is like a really interesting, strange blend. And the steampunk stuff, I think, was really shocking because there was no intimation of that at all with the old art they showed way back in the day, which is mostly the elf lady who is still in here with like the red hair. But like the whole vibe of it is pretty wild. Obviously, this is a game I imagine that we are both wildly excited for. This team has made some of the best games ever,
Sean,
so...
this is the presumptive game of the year 2024. No others
yes.
need apply. Like, until it disappoints, it has that place already, basically. I mean, it is a ridiculously stylish trailer. It looks like it's it's done the baton pass from Persona 5's crazy menus and just gone further in that direction. It looks properly next gen in a lot of ways, particularly for this team. I think it's got such distinctive art and style to it. I mean, yeah, all they really needed to say was those 3 names plus a new game, and we'd be excited. But actually seeing that it exists and it is ready and it is coming and launching, and now, unlike their Persona games, it'll actually be coming to everything from the start. It'll be on Xbox and PlayStation, not as a later re-release. So that's pretty cool. It's not a Switch game. I think it's too ambitious for that. But it is on PC, PS4, PS5, Xbox Series. This is an interesting thing I've noticed that Japanese developers like Capcom and these guys, Sega, are also doing this, where Xbox One support has been dropped, but PS4 support has continued, because the PS4 has a big install base in Japan, where it was hard to get a PS5 until recently. But no, this looks amazing, and it's just cool that it exists. We all knew it was going to take a while. Persona 5 took a long time over Persona 4. So this kind of stuff takes time to develop, but I'm glad they've had the support to make it, because it looks great.
Yes, and also I have had a tab open for a couple weeks at this point, because shortly after this, on the Japanese side for Atlas, they announced that they're doing a stream that is currently going to be 40 hours from now. That is in Japan only, that is with some people, Mafia Kajita, and then a voice actress who have done live streams for Atlas stuff before, like announcing projects and things like that. And they did a bunch of them for Persona 5. They're going to do one for this game. So I'm curious to see. I'm not expecting there to be huge amounts of news, but probably like there will get a little bit more detail and stuff like that there. One thing I did notice, if you're a fan of Japanese voice actors, there is like a lot of big voices that you can hear in that trailer. I'm pretty sure Toru Furuya is in there doing a very Ribbons All Mark style villainy sounding voice.
I heard that too, yeah.
Nakamura Yuichi was definitely in there. Hanae Natsuki was in there. Ono Kensho was in there. There's just like, if you're a fan of modern Japanese voice actors, there was just like a laundry list of, because there weren't a lot of like repeats. Like most people had a couple of lines and then their voice didn't pop up again in the trailer. So it's just like, be like, is that who I thought it was? And rewinding a little bit, it's like, yeah, I'm pretty sure that's Toru Furuya. And yeah, that's pretty exciting if you're into that stuff. Continuing on the Persona train, well, I guess that technically wasn't Persona, but Persona related train, we've had our official reveal of the Persona 3 remake trailer, Persona 3 Reload. This had been accidentally uploaded from one of the different Atlas Instagram channels or something, along with the next game we'll talk about, Persona 5 Tactica. It's a brief trailer showing off Persona 3 Reload. Looks pretty similar to if you saw some of the stuff that was leaked a while ago from behind the scenes stuff. It's similar to that. The big stuff that came out from this is that it is not going to have the Persona 3 portable stuff, so no female main character. It's not going to have episode Aegis or The Answer if you're used to the English naming conventions for Persona 3 Fest. That's a separate campaign that Fest had set after Persona 3. And there was some confusion at first because there was like a thing that made it sound like there was just going to be none of the Fest stuff in there, which was alarming at first. And then it was later clarified, no, some of the stuff that is in Fest will be in there. It's just not episode Aegis. So I assume that means things like the Aegis social link and some of the other like story events and stuff they added in with Fest are going to be there. It's just not going to have the sort of separate content was the implication from the interview I saw.
So I imagine most people are in... There's been a lot of uproar about a lot of things around this. I'm guessing you and I are probably in a fairly similar boat where I understand why they're not doing I understand why they're not doing episode Aegis. That one I do think, like, you can lose it. The female main character stuff, I understand on the level of... I think people underestimate how much work that is. It is a huge, addition to the game. That doesn't mean I don't think it should be there. I think it should be there.
Yeah.
I think it would be nice for there to be a definitive version of Persona 3 that has everything included. This is not going to be that. Honestly, though, my bigger disappointment, just looking at I don't love the look of it. I don't love the graphical style. I think the trailer opens with this shot of Aegis on the beach, which is, in the original game, is an animated cutscene. This is an in-engine thing, and which doesn't mean there won't be an animated cutscene there, but for now we're seeing an in-engine thing. I think it's very bright and colorful and cartoony, and I don't think that aesthetic fully meshes for me with Persona. Like, there's very little shadow or darkness in everything we've seen so far. There was a separate clip I found that IGN had of, like, the protagonist running around the Palatonia Mall, and it also was just, like, very heavily lit. And I don't know, it looks more like Persona 4 to me, or some parts of 5, than it does Scream 3. That doesn't mean it will be bad. I don't know. It's just that coupled with it's not going to be particularly feature complete. I don't know. I don't need a Persona 3 remake to begin with, but yeah.
Yeah, I don't think I have as much of an issue with the art style stuff as you do. Like, I see what you're saying with it. Like, I think there's like some nice things about the art style, but some stuff it doesn't carry forward all the grungy look of Persona 3. That reminds me of Persona 4 The Golden, which did that to Persona 4, because vanilla Persona 4 is a pretty grungy, dark game. Like, if you compare Persona 4's opening cutscene to The Golden's opening cutscene, they're like dramatically different in tone. This is it is hard to say because this is just a trailer showing some random clips from the game. But this doesn't seem to be quite as far as that. But yeah, it is definitely feels a little bit poppier and a little bit more bright in terms of its visual design. Has been some intimation that there will be other more like meaningful changes that they will make in terms of gameplay stuff that they're not like detailing yet, but it seems like that might be something that's interesting that I'm curious to see. Like, it sounds like they're adding more stuff in there. Like, while they're not doing the female main character stuff, it sounds like they're adding in some other stuff to like expand more on some of the social links, because Persona 3 had some pretty like, whatever social link events, because that was the first game that did that concept. And so it sounds like they're trying to find ways to kind of beef that side of the game up a little bit more, to bring it a little bit more in pair with Persona 4 and Persona 5 to see if, there's a chance that could mess things up. There's a chance that they could add a lot of interesting depth to that side of the game. And then I'm also curious, they've said they're doing stuff to kind of like try to freshen up Tartarus as well, because I think they realized that Tartarus, as it existed in that original game, would probably not be super appealing to a lot of people today. So it sounds like it's not like totally changing what Tartarus is in terms of, I wouldn't go in expecting like full Persona 5 style elaborate dungeons with like unique puzzles and stuff, but it sounds like they're trying to do stuff to like freshen it up and make it a little bit more sort of different and change it more as it goes through the game. Again, there's not a lot of details. They didn't show anything. This is just from an interview I read. So I'm curious to see more. Like you, I don't necessarily need a full remake of FES. I am perfectly happy just playing FES on my computer, running it with Japanese voices would be my preferred way to play it. Like one thing that's nice about them doing the remake though is that, you'll have a version that has the FES style stuff with like not all the visual novel stuff that Persona 3 Portable did, that has all the Japanese voices in there. That'll be cool. A note on that, if you prefer the English VA, this is like basically a whole refresh of the cast on the English side. I'm not entirely sure the motivation for that, but they're changing all the actors.
It is. I was talking to my brother about this the other day. It is kind of weird because some of the actors are people who do video games all the time, like Michelle Ruff is always around. The woman who did Mitsuru, she's in every Fire Emblem. Like, it's not like they're unavailable. There were some, like, they'd already recast a pretty big section of Persona 3's cast for the various spin-offs, and then they were going to have to do Junpei because of the Vic Mignogna of it all. So I do wonder if it was just a thought of, like, at the point where most of them are gone anyway, maybe we just start fresh, which might work. They've put together, I don't doubt that they'll put together a good dub. It will be a little sad to not have all those voices there. But again, they did just put out Persona 3 Portable on consoles for everyone to go play. It's there, it's got the original dub, it's got the original Japanese, it's got the female main character route. It does make sense to me now why Portable is the one they chose for the HD re-release, because this will complement the remake better. Look, Persona 3 is my favorite game of all time. I will play this day one. I'm going to try to play Persona 3 Portable at some time this year, because I still have never played the female main character route to the end, and I have it on my Switch, and I want to play that before the remake, but there you go.
Yeah, but I think it's, suffice to say, this is not the sort of like the hailed Persona 3 from Prophecy that is like the one Persona 3 to rule them all. This is not what this is going to be, which is disappointing. I didn't necessarily think it was going to be, even if I really wanted it to be. But yeah, obviously we will check it out. Persona 3, it turns out, is a hell of a game. Another hell of a game is Persona 5. And Persona 5 has had a few spin-offs, and they're making another one, which you would have known a while ago if you follow Instagram, Atlas, or whatever the fuck, because this was another trailer for Persona 5 Tactica, a game whose title I have not yet gotten over. Every time I look at it, I think it's a typo, because it looks like it should be Persona 5 Tactics, and A is right next to S on the keyboard, so it's a common typo to flip those. And every time I've seen it, I'm like, oh, someone fucked that up. It should be called, like, I've seen like tweets and Kotaku articles or whatever. It's like Persona 5 Tactica. I go, haha, that's not the name of that game. Oh wait, yeah, it is.
I'm really excited for this one. Tactics, strategy games like this, as everybody knows, is basically my favorite flavor of RPGs. I think you can do tactics for goddamn anything. Gears of War Tactics was great, for fuck's sake. Mario and Rabbids, that's a tactics game. This looks good. It looks like the real full tactics experience. It's got it feels like this is the spiritual successor to Persona Q in terms of art style, because it's much more chibi-fied, kind of cartoony, but I think it works. And yeah, I'm psyched for it. It comes out November 17th. That seems like a good date. It's coming out on everything, including Switch. And my Persona folder on my Switch is very big now, and it feels like it is the Vita reborn, so I'm excited for this.
Yes, and there was a video released shortly afterwards in Japan on like the Atlas Japanese YouTube channel with Ikue Otani voicing Morgana, talking about some stuff on the game. It's like 10 minutes long, and I watched that. There are a couple things I gleaned from that. One thing I found really fascinating, there's like a little asterisk next to the Xbox versions that was like the Xbox versions are download only in Japan, which is amusing to me. Like, it's like, man, if you're a Japanese person that for whatever reason you're just like way into the Xbox brand, it's gotta suck, because because everything comes with an asterisk. It's like, yeah, it's coming to everything, but not Xbox One. Or, yeah, it's coming to everything, but man, if you want the disc, you're shit out of luck.
Luckily, Sean, that person is purely theoretical and does not exist. So
there's at least one of them. There's got to be at least one of them. They sell like 20 Xboxes a week, man. It's like, someone's buying them. I mean, it can't just be like expats or something. There's at least like one Japanese person who's like way into Xbox. Anyways, here's some of the other stuff I got from that video on the YouTube channel. So there's a new character in the game called L, or Edu. I assume they're just going to romanize that to L. And she is going to be voiced by Takahashi Die, who's a voice actor I really like. She is Hu Tao in Genshin Impact. She's Mash in Fate Grand Order. She's in a lot of stuff. She's really good.
I saw this note, Sean, and I was running my mind like, she has to have been in Persona before, right? And I was like, no. Oh, it's weird she has not. That seems like the kind of actor who would be in Persona. Now she is.
Yes, now she is. And they intimated that there will be some other new characters that they haven't revealed yet. It does seem like if you're someone who really wants like Kasumi from Persona 5 The Royal to be in there, wouldn't get my hopes up. It doesn't seem like they're going to have that, maybe the cameo thing as a move or something, I don't know. But I am a little bit annoyed between this and Persona 5 Strikers that like the spin-off characters aren't in the other spin-offs. It's like, it would be cool if you had some of those characters around in the other spin-offs. It's a little bit disappointing.
I mean, in Strikers it made sense because that was developed. It came out before The Royal, so like they couldn't have done it. This one, it's just confusing because, I mean, this is going to come out on platforms where Royal is the only version of Persona 5, and it won't have Kasumi, who is on the cover of Persona 5. It's weird, but yeah.
Yes. And then a lot of the combat stuff or the tactic stuff looks cool, where they are trying to incorporate Persona-style mechanics, similar to if you play Persona 5 Strikers, like finding ways to work that in stylistically with the Muso stuff. So there's like a one more style mechanic that gives you an extra move if you hit an enemy's weakness. But my favorite is there is an all-out attack, which if you watch the trailer, you see there where like you have 3 characters, so it's 3 characters at a time per tactics match or whatever you call it. And if you have them situated in a triangle around an enemy, you can do an all-out attack style thing. In the English trailer, they called this a triple threat. But I watched that Japanese Morgana video, and they had the Japanese trailer on there, and it was not called a triple threat. It had a different name. Jonathan, I want you to take a guess. What do you think it is called in Japanese?
Okay, so triple threat, it's about 3. Is it something to do with the triad? And it's going to make you sound like a gangster.
Yes. So here, I'll give you my first hint is it is in English, and it is a play on the word triangle, because you're kind of getting there.
Okay. Triad. Is it Triforce?
No, it's not Triforce. You want your second hint?
Yes, I think I need it.
Okay, your second hint is going to be, it's what threesomes should be called from now on. If you have sex with 3 people, this is what you should call it.
Tribulation.
No. You want to know the answer?
Yes.
It's called the tribangle. It is the tribangle, Jonathan, and I never have I more wanted to import the Japanese version of a game that's going to come out in English than this, because just like you have on the side of the screen in giant capital letters with an exclamation point in that very stylish Persona 5 font, the word tribangle. And
so it's just the word triangle with a B plopped in the middle of it.
Yes, it's like you take the word bang and you put it in the middle of the word triangle, and you get a tribangle. And if you want to hear Morgana say the word tribangle, you can watch that Japanese video. And when I saw that, I lost my shit, and I've never been more disappointed in an English dub, in the cowardice of English Atlas, than changing tribangle to triple threat, because tribangle is so good.
At least we'll be able to hear it, right? With the Japanese voices?
Yes.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, man, that's good. That's very good. This game's going to rock. I'm excited for this. I also need to play Strikers before this comes out.
Yeah, Strikers is good. One last note, this also came up in that Japanese video. They did say there's going to be some kind of add-on, like a DLC thingy at launch, with, they said, a highly anticipated character. There's a piece of art there, and my guess is that it's going to be like an Akechi thing. There'll be some kind of like, it sounded like it was like a separate campaign thing that also give you something you could use in the main story. And I'm guessing, because I know Akechi is like, it's wildly popular in the Japanese fan base with all the Fujoshi that want to, ship Akechi and the protagonist together. So if you want to get that sweet, sweet otaku money, that's how you do it.
I mean, the games also have wanted to do that if you played Royal. And
yes.
Yeah. Next one, Sean. Senua's Saga Hellblade 2.
And the saga of Xbox games that have been in development for 5,000 years. Senua's Saga, Hellblade 2.
Announced during Game Awards 2019, pre-COVID. Boy, that was a long time ago, Sean. No, I mean, look, the first one is a brilliant game. Hellblade Senua's Sacrifice 2017. It was, I think, my number 4 or 5 of that year. That was a special year for games. It's good. I'm very curious how you make a sequel to it at all. The trailers we've seen are so vague and broad. But we'll see. It'll come out eventually.
Yeah. Like, the thing they showed at Xbox is like a long 5-minute thing that I didn't watch all the way through it because I kind of got bored. I didn't play that first game.
It's also not gameplay. It's like a long cutscene.
Yeah. There's no combat or anything in it. They said it's slated for 2024, but them showing this made me not super confident because it just didn't look like much of a trailer. Like if you compare that to the trailer for Metaphor Fantazio, like that felt like, okay, this game's probably not all the way together. There's some like rough frame rate stuff in that trailer, but it looks like, okay, I could believe that comes out next year. The Senua's Saga Hellblade 2 thing, if like that looked like, if you told me that was like an old school E3 style demo where like the rest of that game didn't exist, I would believe you.
Yeah. Again, it's a talented team. I hope it comes out, but there you go. That's something. We need to have a longer discussion about this at some point. Something is in the water at Xbox where games do not get done, and they certainly don't get done on time. And it is a weird thing across that entire company, and I don't know what it is.
Well, one thing here, and this I guess kind of transitions into the last game we'll talk about for Xbox, which is Starfield, and there's a couple of other things we'll do to wrap up for today. Because the Xbox was the majority of it. But like when you compare the Xbox thing with the PlayStation thing, it's interesting because I know that people who like thought the Xbox showcase was really good, who watched it live, and it does, like, they had a lot of stuff. I think both of us always have been like more down on the Xbox shows than the broader public are because they just show a lot of stuff. Yes,
they always have a lot of stuff. Most of it you can play on other platforms, and I have to say, this is a pet peeve of mine, but every year, I think for about 10 years now, there has been a big Xbox show, they've shown a lot of stuff, and then there's a breathless series of headlines of people going, Xbox is back, they've done it, they're finally on track, they're going to do it. And it happens every year, and all of the journalists are a bunch of goddamn lemmings being led over the edge, and they say it every time, and it's like, fool me once, fool me twice, fool me 10 times? I don't know. Maybe it is, maybe they are back. But you don't know that, and they've fooled you a lot of times in the past, game journalists, so maybe stop writing that fucking headline.
Yeah, but one of the things that like I find very fascinating, I just think this shows like the shifting in different approaches to showing games off, is Sony has, for the past couple of years, they have really shifted really hard to this model where they do not really advertise their games or show them off until you're about 6 months out. Right? So it's like Spider-Man 2, we had the one trailer at the PS5 announcement event just to have something to show. They did not say anything about that game until this gameplay demo, and that game is out, assuming it doesn't get delayed, October 20th. It was the same thing with like God of War Ragnarok. Horizon was the same way, where it's just like they, in a way that I think like I saw online like chatter amongst like Sony fans being kind of almost nervous about it, like why aren't they showing their games? Like why isn't there like a dozen trailers for God of War Ragnarok? Because it wasn't until like 3 months or something before God of War Ragnarok came out that they actually showed anything meaningful about that game. And that kind of has extended to this showcase where they basically showed, other than like a couple of things on the edges, like this marathon game, there's some stuff from some smaller studios like VR stuff that Sony has that is technically first party. But, you know, they didn't show a big Naughty Dog thing. They didn't show like whatever Sucker Punch is working on, right? We know that they have other games that presumably could have a trailer for them that they just, for whatever reason, they choose not to show. And it feels like PlayStation has decided, kind of after the launch of the PS5, it feels like they're like, we are not going to do the thing that was the PS4 model they did, where we're going to have trailers for games 4 years out, and then every year at E3 you have another trailer. Like, how many trailers for Days Gone did we see? How many trailers for like Last of Us Part 2 and like demos and E3 things did we see for Ghost of Tsushima, right? They were there for like multiple years in a row. It feels like Sony has moved to a, no, we're going to wait and like tease it maybe a year out, do a like demo thing 6 months out, then and do like a deep dive in like the weeks or like month or two leading up. And so that led to, I think, for a lot of people, and me included, finding the PlayStation Showcase kind of like thin, other than the Spider-Man 2 thing was really awesome. But the flip side is the Xbox thing, where I feels like maybe they want to shift maybe to the Sony thing, but they have so many things announced. We know everything that every single Microsoft studio is working on. We know they're making a Gears of War. We know that they're making a Halo Battle Royale called Project Tatanka or whatever with certain affinity. We know that they're making a Perfect Dark game. We know they're making State of Decay 3. We know that Rare is making Everwild, right? It's like we know every single thing on their plate. And it kind of feels like we know every fucking game that's gonna come out in the series goddamn generation at some point. Because like, at least until we get to the second time around, everything is a known quantity. And I think that's what kind of leads to this scenario with this Xbox show, where it's like everything they showed. Yes, they showed more gameplay stuff for some of these games like Avowed, but these are all games we've known about for fucking years. And it's like, there is something for me like kind of exhausting about, I don't want to talk about Hellblade 2 and Avowed and Fable again, because like I'm already tired of it, because we've been thinking about these games for 4, 5, 6 years for some of the longest ones. And one of those is Starfield, a game that did have, I'll say, like if you watch that big deep dive, it looks very impressive. Like they are doing a lot of stuff, and it's nice that they actually showed lots of gameplay and broke down the systems and really went in on it. But like, I already feel like I'm exhausted of Starfield before Starfield comes out, and that's kind of where I'm at with that.
Yeah, I don't like Bethesda's games to begin with. I think it's a bad style of game design. I think this looks kind of like that. I don't know, nothing about it impresses or speaks to me, and that's not necessarily against the game. It's just not my bag. But yeah, it's also like, we've been hearing about this game for so long. I think it's gonna appeal to who it appeals to. Maybe it'll appeal to a broader audience, and maybe Xbox will have a moment this fall, and maybe not. I don't know. But it was nothing about it like grabbed me.
Yeah, like I watched the bigger thing, and it's like the game showed better here than it ever has. Like I don't think anytime they showed the game before it's worked. I still have my fundamental issue with it of I just don't like the aesthetic they're going for. I think what they're in my opinion, very cringily calling NASA punk just does not work. I think I don't think there is a sort of middle space between fantasy and practical space travel that they're like hitting on that is interesting. It just looks really painfully generic, because you're not getting, at least looking at the trailers and the gameplay stuff. Maybe I would feel different when it comes out and if I play it. But it doesn't feel like you're getting any of the tension and the fear and the isolation of like actual real world space travel, which is what all the NASA design elements they're borrowing from communicate to me, right? These like weird ships that like feel like if one thing goes wrong, this whole thing's going to go up in a ball of fire. Or it's like if one little piece of space debris goes a little bit out and it nails your fucking satellite communication thing, it's like, oh shit, like we've lost control and we're spinning out of control and we can't recorrect and we're going to just, die out here in space. That's like, Gravity the movie being like the thing that delivers that in a movie story way the best. The big bulky spacesuits, all of that communicates that to me. Something like the video game Outer Wilds, not Outer Worlds, Outer Wilds, that game does that so well with a very kinchy, it's not straight up NASA, but it's that kind of rickety, oh shit, one wrong move and you've been swallowed up by the like oblivion of empty space. Starfield isn't doing any of that, but they're borrowing all those design elements. But the thing with all those design elements is they're very minimalistic, they're very practical. And so when you're doing that story where it feels like you're doing everything you can just to survive in space, that minimalism and practicality and functionalism really works. But if you want to be like, I'm role-playing a space cowboy and I'm a space trucker going on crazy shootouts in space, that doesn't work for me at all. Like there, I want Star Wars, or I want Destiny, or I want something that communicates the fantasy of space, not the practical realities of it. And everything I see when I look at this game, and they showed a lot more of it here, just feels like it's falling into that aesthetic trap of either it is just kind of boring looking, or it's just aping stuff you've already seen before. Like when they do space western, they show a space western town, And it's not even space Western. It's just Western. Like, they just go into saloon with, like, saloon doors. And there's just, like, antlers above the bar. And it's like, you're not even doing the Star Wars thing of where you've reimagined what a saloon looks like in this crazy, like, rundown space age world with the cantinas. This is just a Fallout town. You're just technically are in space. And I think that aesthetic thing, maybe if like the game comes out and it's really good and the content and the storytelling and that stuff is actually interesting, that stuff wouldn't bother me. But when all I have to go on is like the trailers, like it really keeps me out of being invested in the game as someone who likes Bethesda games, right? I love Oblivion. I love Skyrim. I love Fallout 3. I was pretty iffy on 4 like most people. And 4 was the last big game they made, if you discount 76, which was kind of half made by a different studio. And this just doesn't speak to the things I liked about the other games that they have made for me personally. And I'm very skeptical about their ability to pull off the big, giant No Man's Sky style space thing of where they're selling so much of the scope of this game and how many worlds there are and all the procedural tech that goes into placing like designed caves and shit, and like here, like we'll populate these planets with side quests from this pool. So it's like all that shit. I'm just like, why not just make one like cool solar system with some really well-designed locations that are very memorable? Like, I just don't know at this point in my life if I need to explore space in that way. And if I did, I'd probably prefer a game like No Man's Sky that's just about that, rather than having that be all over my story RPG also.
Yeah, the pitch doesn't... I, at this point in my life, if your pitch is about how big your game is, I tune out. I don't need that. There's games are too big in general. You can be more focused. That's okay. I also think, you talked about sort of the aesthetic of this game. I also just think it kind of looks outdated. I'm going to be honest. The graphics, I mean, they're still running on the engine they built for Skyrim at this point. I think it looks... it does not look appreciably next gen to me. That's not necessarily a problem, but knowing that Bethesda games are usually pretty iffy at launch, to be kind.
Yes.
This one will probably be too. We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. I'm curious about it. I might end up picking it up. It's coming up September 6th. Like, if it's really good and if people particularly think the story and that stuff is interesting, like, I'm not sort of writing it off completely, but I'm very skeptical. All right,
Yeah.
a couple last
we
things.
both have Xboxes, and it is on Game Pass, so it'll be easy to check out if you want, but There you go.
So a couple of last things to wrap up with. Ubisoft had their Ubisoft Forward, and unlike a lot of past years, Ubisoft did have some stuff to show. Turns out Ubisoft does make video games still. So they showed off Star Wars Outlaws. This is developed by Massive Entertainment, the Division people. This game has been kind of leaked, or I think they kind of have mentioned they've worked on it because they have the license, but they've never actually shown it before. And they did show a big cinematic trailer at the Summer Game Fest thing, and then they had a big gameplay demo for it. It looks interesting. Like, it's like, I'm not totally sold on it. It looks very next gen at the very least. Like, it looks like, okay, this is a PS5 Xbox Series game. It's not cross gen at all. It's not running on the old consoles. And I'm interested in it on the face of, like, it's Star Wars. I like Star Wars stuff. I am a little bit tired of, like, the Empire stuff, having another game that's set in the original trilogy timeline with Empire and all that. It's like, I am pretty ready to move on at this point with Star Wars from the original trilogy era stuff, because we've just been stuck there for fucking ever. But it's very much going after the, like, roleplay as a Han Solo-esque scoundrel outlaw type character. It looks like it's set between episodes 5 and 6 specifically, because you do see what looks like Carbonite Han in the more cinematic-y trailer. But it's very much like open world third-person shooter style game, as far as you can tell from that gameplay demo.
One thing I just think, this is a little thing, but I kind of liked, it looks like the whole game is in widescreen. By that I mean anamorphic widescreen. It's got the black bars on the top and bottom, even in gameplay, which I don't think I've ever seen in a big 3D game. The only game I'm aware of that did something like that was Virginia, the indie game. But this is like, and when it goes to cutscenes, it actually goes to ultra widescreen. And I don't know if that's just a thing in the trailer. The UI is arranged in a way that it looks like it is actually a game played in 239:1 widescreen, which is what I kind of thought they should have done with the Jedi Survivor games, because Star Wars is so built on that wide aesthetic. It's kind of interesting to me.
Yeah, I'm curious if that is what the actual game will be, or if, like, because that's like if you have an ultra wide monitor on PC, like
Right.
that's the aspect ratio that would be in, and there are PC games that support it that way. I'm curious to see if that is like how this game has to be played on console also, because there is one game I know of that did this, which is the first Evil Within. But one of the reasons why the first Evil Within did it is because you can save performance, because you don't have to render out what is at the top or bottom of that frame.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's still an open question of exactly what that indicates. Is this them being stylish for their trailer and it'll have an ultra wide mode? Is if you even play this on PS5, will it look like that? I don't think it's entirely clear, but
Wonder if there'll be like options, like you can render it in ultra wide, but on a 16:9 display and have it letterboxed, which is what this is. Or you can just, I wonder maybe, and then maybe the default is 16:9 full. We'll see.
yeah, we'll see.
The fact that the cutscenes go to basically what this looks like 255 to 1 to me, which is like Cinerama, that's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll see with that game. This is obviously very early. There's no like sense of when this will come out. Then they have, this is a game we've known that Ubisoft has been making for a while, but they're making their Avatar game, Avatar Frontiers of Pandora. This got a release date of December 7th, 2023. So just squeaking in at the end of 2023. And it is Far Cry Avatar. It was like very funny to me where if you watch the trailer, you're like, yeah, okay, this is Avatar stuff. And then slowly you're like, this kind of looks like Far Cry. They're like, that looks like Far Cry. And then there's a point where you're like, and you're playing as a Na'vi character, and your character's like on a hill overlooking a military encampment, and you take out like binoculars and you tag dudes. I'm like, okay, yes, this is a Far Cry game where you play as Avatar people. Okay. But you know, the Far Cry games are good. So it's like getting Far Cry, but it's like not you invading like a third world country and all the shit that goes along with that, and instead, you know, doing still what seems like kind of how they set it up, a weird white savior-y kind of narrative. But you know, it's Avatar, it's going to be that in some way. But at least like it's fantasy. You've got the crazy art design of Avatar, all that kind of stuff. Like that could be cool. You know, the art design in the world of Avatar is cool, even if I'm not a fan of the movie. But by like Far Cry, the art design is nice. It might be okay.
I'm actually kind of excited for this. I don't know, maybe excited is too strong. I think Far Cry Avatar actually sounds like a pretty good pitch, because Far Cry has some good game stuff, and I've never cared one iota for the setting or the stories because I think they're bad. Avatar is a really cool setting. Avatar is arguably a cooler setting for a video game than it is for a movie. Yes. And I will say, looking at this is one of the most gorgeous video games I've ever seen. The graphical fidelity of this thing looks properly next gen. It is big. Honestly, I think the animation and everything looks better than Avatar 1 did. It's not quite to the level of Avatar 2, which is the brand new movie, but like it's in that vein. It's bringing in a lot of design elements that were brought in Avatar 2. It's cool. I don't know. A Far Cry adventure, but in a world that looks this fucking cool, I think is an interesting pitch. And then there's also all the flying stuff that you have with the big avatar birds. I don't know what they're called. And that looks cool to me too. So I don't know. It could be kind of boring and dumb, but it could also be interesting. Avatar is a world that I would like to go explore in a video game, and this seems like they did a decent job with it. So at the very least, they nailed the look of it, which is the main thing I would want. So
yeah, the graphics are phenomenal. Like particularly, I think like they, you know, because you kind of expect the world to look really nice, but they particularly nailed the look of the Na'vi characters. Like those look really good. And I know that Digital Foundry, John Linneman at Digital Foundry kind of pitched the idea on one of the breakdowns they did of some of this stuff of maybe intercutting when the game comes out, the game with some shots from Avatar 1, because I do think in some of those wide shots, I think it could potentially be somewhat convincing that like unless you're like studying it very closely and it's like cut together pretty quickly, it might be a little bit hard to tell with some of those environments and stuff because they look really fucking good and the lighting is really good. It seems like they're using some ray tracing global illumination for the lighting, is what the Digital Foundry breakdown suggested. So yeah, it's visually gorgeous. As someone who has played a lot of the Far Cry games, like I end up rolling my eyes a bit at the Far Cry stuff, but you know, like those games are good. And if you haven't played a lot of them and aren't tired of that style of game, like this is a much more interesting setting than like fake Cuba, which is what Far Cry 6 was. Then we had a little bit of Assassin's Creed Mirage. I was more compelled by this than I expected to be. I'm not like chomping at the bit for it, but there is something about Assassin's Creed going back to old Assassin's Creed, and I was like, yeah, Assassin's Creed 2 was a hell of a fucking game. And I got very tired very quickly of the Witcher 3 style Assassin's Creeds. And this is absolutely a huge throwback to specifically Assassin's Creed 1, but obviously with like a lot of the gameplay improvements and stuff. Like it's a similar setting to 1. It seems like they're going for more of that assassin stuff, which one is like the only Assassin's Creed game to actually seriously be about assassinating people. And it seems like that's the actual pitch here. It's like, that could be pretty cool. It's also coming out October.
It's got a crouch button now.
It has a crouch button, which thank fucking Jesus Christ. I mean, obviously that's been Assassin's Creed for a while, but it took a long time. However, this game is also coming out October 12th, which is 5 days before Alan Wake 2 and 8 days before Spider-Man 2. So I will not be playing it at launch, but maybe one day I will play Assassin's Creed Mirage.
Seems like a good game to pick up on Black Friday.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, it's a Ubisoft game. They go on sale really quick. And then one note I threw in here just because I couldn't fucking believe it. So Skull and Bones had a trailer. Again, this game has been in development, we've known, for 10 years at this point. And Skull and Bones is apparently going to have a closed beta from August 25th to 28th. So if you are just obsessed with trying to learn what the fuck is Skull and Bones actually, well, you maybe have an opportunity to learn. I didn't look up how you signed up for it. I assume you go to the Ubisoft website. But it is incredible to me that we are still talking about this game, because I had this thought when I saw this information and the Assassin's Creed Mirage trailer, that Skull and Bones is a game that was inspired by all the pirate shit in Assassin's Creed 4. The Assassin's Creed, so much time has passed. The Assassin's Creed franchise did a couple of games like Assassin's Creed 4, broadly, Syndicate and stuff like that. Not pirate stuff, but that general kind of game, to the point where they ran that into the ground. Then they started a new kind of Assassin's Creed game inspired by Witcher 3. Enough of those have come out. They've run that style of game into the ground, and so much time has passed that we are wrapping back around to, we are doing the throwback to the same general kind of Assassin's Creed game that inspired Skull and Bones in the first place. And at this point, they should just keep waiting. They should just take a couple more years, then eventually you'll have the throwback to Assassin's Creed 4 that will make Skull and Bones relevant again, and you can finally put out Skull and Bones in 2026, along with Assassin's Creed 4 Redux.
So we know this game's been in development since 2013. Do you remember what year this was announced, Sean, with its big E3 demo?
No.
It was 2017. Donald Trump had been president for 6 months. That's how long ago this was.
Oh my god. It's just Skull and Bones. Skull and Bones. It's just, we will all be Skull and Bones before this game comes out. I think we might have made that joke before, but
We probably have.
And we will probably make it again, because this game, they had announced at some point that Skull and Bones was supposed to come out this year, and I don't think they had changed that until this show where they showed a trailer. They're like, there's going to be a closed beta this August. When is this game coming out? It is a mystery. All right. Then the last thing to mention, and actually there's only one of these that I actually want to mention, because the other two Capcom things are kind of whatever. Capcom is an amazing company. Capcom is also weird with their announcements, because they put out so many amazing games, but they never time their amazing games with their showcases, because every time they have a showcase, they have fucking nothing to show. The last showcase they did, they showed VR RE4 and the Resident Evil 8 DLC for the Game of the Year edition of Resident Evil 8. They never have had a showcase that showed Resident Evil 4 remake. They didn't have a showcase that showed off all the big Street Fighter 6 shit. So I'm confused by Capcom. Their games are amazing. Their marketing stuff seems a little bit confusing with how they time it, because they had a showcase here, and the only things they talked about were a remaster of Ace Attorney 456. They talked about how their Pragmata game, which they had a teaser trailer for at the PS5 launch event, that was supposed to come out this year, and they said it's not coming out this year, it'll come out sometime. They didn't say when. And then the only real meaningful thing they showed was some Dragon's Dogma 2. They did not show much of it, but if you like Dragon's Dogma 1, which I do, and that is a very good game that is quite old at this point, Dragon's Dogma 2 looks pretty fucking rad. It looks like what you would want. It's got all the big, cool combat, character action stuff with all the different classes, which was one of the big appeals to Dragon's Dogma. You can still climb all over the monsters. like stab them and shit like that. The big new thing they pitched, that's not just like, here's updated versions of all the stuff you like from the original game, is there's a lot more advanced physics stuff. So they talked about like, destroying a bridge or a building that the monster was on and having it collapse, so that way you can do damage that way, or like having a chain and being able to pull the monster's leg out from under it and having it fall over and things like that, and adding in that, which that sounds so in line if you play Dragon's Dogma. I think that like immediately makes sense with the very physical kind of feeling of that game, and the climbing and the combat and all that stuff has this very tactile quality to it. That adding in a whole physics element to the combat as well sounds really cool. All the pawn stuff, which is this weird system that kind of allows you to make like an NPC buddy that follows you around, all that shit is still in there. All the weird shit you like from Dragon's Dogma is there, and they're adding some new stuff on top of it, and it's all very pretty next-gen looking graphics. So there's not a lot of info out there. They don't have a date, but I'm very excited for Dragon's Dogma 2.
Absolutely. Sean, what are you most excited for of everything we talked about today?
In terms of something very practical that I know is going to be good, that I know when it's going to come out, Spider-Man 2. In terms of like gameplay demo stuff, it's Spider-Man 2. In terms of like something that's a little bit more kind of don't know exactly what it's going to be and don't know exactly when it's going to come out, it's Metaphor Fantazio, of course, which hopefully that comes out next year. That game looks very good, but that's the two things I'm most excited for this. Of course, all the Yakuza stuff is up there as well.
I would basically give the same answer. All of that looks good. Foam Stars surprised me. Sonic Superstars might impress. And Sandland might be a little treat if we get another Toriyama art 3D game. Could be fun, but yeah.
Yeah, so lots of good video games. This year is like insanely packed with video games. There's so many games to play. Lots of good video games on the horizon. But I do think if there's one thing I want to do in a video game more than anything else, Jonathan, it's try Bengal.